Abraham had reached 99 years of age when God delivered an extraordinary promise, and his wife Sarah was 90. By every rational and biological standard, what was being proposed was simply impossible. Yet that very impossibility became the cornerstone of God's plan to extend blessing to every nation across the face of the earth. But here is what most people never fully discover about Abraham's story. His walk of faith was not a smooth, uninterrupted road of confident belief. He stumbled, took wrong turns, and at times attempted to step in and help God bring his own promises to pass. Today you are receiving the full, unfiltered account of Abraham's life. Every triumph, every failure, and every turning point that forged him into the father of faith. Before we get into it, though, if this is your first time on this channel, please consider tapping that like and subscribe button. It truly makes a difference. Also, drop a comment letting us know where you are watching from and what time it is there. We are growing a community that spans the whole globe. So, with all of that said, let us get started, shall we? Picture a vast desert sky, boundless and deep blue, stretching out beyond anything the human eye can take in. Stars are scattered across that canvas like tiny diamonds, each one carrying ancient light from distant corners of the universe. The wind moves softly through the sand dunes, telling stories older than memory itself. In that quiet, something remarkable happens. A voice speaks, not through thunder or earthquake, but with the calm authority of the one who fashioned the stars in the first place. That voice is about to change everything for one man, and through him reach every corner of the world we know. His name was Abram, though history would come to know him by a different name. He lived 4,000 years ago, in a time when the world was young and wild. Cities stood like islands, rising out of oceans of wilderness. People worshipped gods, carved from stone and hammered from gold, searching for meaning through rituals as old as civilization itself. But this story is not about those gods. It is about the God who selected one unremarkable man to begin something beautiful, a promise that would reverberate through generations, a blessing intended for every family on the face of the earth. Abram had no idea any of this was coming when his journey started. He was simply a man living his life, tending his animals, caring for his household. He had no way of knowing that the Creator of everything was watching him closely, already preparing to speak his name. The ancient world pulsed with life and danger. Mighty empires stretched across entire continents. Kings erected towers that seemed to graze the sky, each one a declaration of their own greatness. Trade routes connected distant lands, carrying spices and stories from one culture to the next. Yet, in the middle of all that grandeur, something had gone missing. The connection between heaven and earth had grown thin. People had forgotten the voice that spoke the world into existence. They shaped idols with their own hands and bowed before things that could neither see nor hear. Into that world, God chose to speak again. Not to kings or priests, but to a wandering nomad with calloused hands and a heart that was ready to listen. The selection seems almost impossible to comprehend. Why Abram? Why not someone with more power, more prestige? Perhaps that is precisely the point. God takes delight in choosing the unlikely. He perceives something in ordinary hearts that the world consistently overlooks. Faith, trust, and the willingness to step into the unknown when love calls your name. Abram's story begins in a place of comfort and moves toward a land of promise. Between those 2 points stretches an entire lifetime of walking with God. Sometimes the path ahead was clear, other times it was wrapped in uncertainty. But always, without exception, the promise remained. This is more than ancient history sitting behind the glass of a museum. It is the story of what unfolds when someone says yes to the impossible. When ordinary faith meets extraordinary grace. When a man chooses to trust the voice that beckons him into mystery. As you listen to this story, allow yourself to drift into those ancient landscapes. Feel the desert wind against your face. See the very stars that Abraham would one day count. Walk beside him as he learns that the God who created everything also knows his name personally. The journey is about to begin. A journey that started 4,000 years ago and has never truly ended. Because the same God who called Abraham still calls out to hearts that are willing to listen, still makes promises to those who are prepared to believe. Rest now, and let this ancient story carry you to places where faith becomes sight, where promises become reality, and where one ordinary man's yes to God becomes a blessing poured out upon the entire world. The ancient city gleams as morning light touches its walls, painting them gold against the brightening sky. This city stands with pride beside great rivers, where water flows like life itself through channels carefully carved by human hands. Gardens bloom in neat, orderly rows, fed by the resourcefulness and ingenuity of the people who tend them. The whole place hums with activity and ambition. Merchants arrive from distant lands, their camels laden with goods. Silk from the east, precious stones from the south, metals shaped and hammered into forms of remarkable beauty. The markets buzz with voices speaking many different languages, all drawn together by the timeless pursuit of trade. Tall towers climb toward the heavens, their sides adorned with glazed bricks that catch the sunlight like jewels set in stone. These ziggurats stand as monuments to everything human hands have achieved. Each day, people climb their wide steps, carrying offerings to gods they have carved from stone and precious metals. Into this world of progress and prosperity, young Abram grows up. His father, Terah, works with skilled and practiced hands, shaping clay and metal into idols destined for the temples. Their workshop rings with the sounds of hammers and fire, producing gods for people to worship and fear. The irony runs quietly but deeply through everything. Terah shapes objects that cannot speak, yet people kneel before them asking for wisdom. He forms hands that cannot lift a finger to help, yet families place their trust in them for protection. Every day he creates new deities while the one true God remains a stranger to his household. Abram watches his father at work, learning the craft, but perhaps sensing that something is not quite right. How can a god be made by human hands? How can the thing that is created ever be greater than the one who created it? These questions may not yet have taken the shape of words, but they stir in his young heart like seeds lying in wait for rain. The culture surrounding him flows past like a great river. Children learn to read and write on clay tablets, mastering the wedge-shaped marks that preserve human thought for future generations. Schools teach mathematics and astronomy, medicine and law. The civilization has achieved wonders that will echo down through history. Yet for all its learning and sophistication, it remains spiritually hollow. People sacrifice their children to gods that demand blood. They consult stars and omens, looking to silent heavens for guidance. Fear is woven together with worship, and superstition mingles with a genuine, aching longing for the divine. Abram's family observes these customs as naturally as breathing, because in their world, that is simply what life looks like. They mark the festivals and carry out the rituals, bring their offerings and pray before household gods. Terah's workshop supplies the very idols that fill their neighbors' homes and temples. But something sets this family apart, even though they do not yet understand what that something is. Perhaps it is a restlessness, a quiet sense that there must be more than what their eyes can see. Perhaps the true God is already working on their hearts, preparing them for the moment when he will finally speak. The city's wealth impresses visitors arriving from every corner of the known world. Houses stand 2 and 3 stories tall, with inner courtyards where families gather in the cool of the evening. Servants tend gardens where date palms offer sweet fruit and welcome shade. Trade guilds organize craftsmen into powerful associations. Potters, weavers, metalworkers, and jewelers each occupy their own defined place within the city's complex social structure. Laws governing commerce and family life are written in careful script on tablets that will survive for thousands of years. Religious festivals mark the turning of the seasons, drawing the whole city together in celebration and reverence. Processions wind through the streets as priests carry statues of gods from one temple to another. Music and incense fill the air, creating an atmosphere dense with mystery and devotion. Within this setting, Abram becomes a man. He learns his father's craft, understands the ways of his people, and grows fluent in the rhythms of urban life. Yet something in his spirit remains unsettled, as though he is waiting for a voice that has not yet spoken. The gods of the city seem so real to those who worship them. They have names and stories, personalities and preferences. Priests interpret their will through elaborate rituals, and people organize their entire lives around the effort of keeping these silent deities satisfied. But Abram will discover that the real God requires no image carved by human hands, no temple built through human labor. He speaks with his own voice, makes his own promises, and extends his blessing according to his own mysterious and sovereign wisdom. For now, though, Abram simply lives and learns, grows and dreams, completely unaware that the Creator of all things is watching him with love, already preparing to call his name and redirect his destiny forever. The call of Abram. Silence settles over the city like a gentle blanket. The evening's work is done. The markets have gone quiet, and families have drawn together in their courtyards to share the final meal of the day. Stars begin their ancient procession across the deepening sky. The same stars that have watched over this land since the very beginning of time. Abram sits in stillness, perhaps tilting his face upward toward that canopy of light. His life follows familiar and comfortable patterns. Work and rest, seasons and festivals, the settled rhythms of an established existence. He has a home, a family, a respected place in the community, everything a man could want for security and peace. Then something extraordinary breaks through the quiet. A voice speaks into the stillness of his heart, not with human words that dissipate on the wind, but with divine authority that resonates in the deepest chambers of the soul. The God who fashioned all things chooses this precise moment, this specific man, this peaceful evening, to change the course of everything. "Leave your country," the voice says, with infinite gentleness and unmistakable command. "Leave your people and your father's household, and travel to the land I will show you." The words settle over him like morning mist, beautiful and mysterious all at once. Leave behind everything familiar, everything safe, everything that gives life its sense of meaning and security. The request borders on the impossible, almost severe in what it demands. But then the promise follows, sweet as honey and solid as bedrock. "I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." Abram's heart races as these words settle deep into his understanding. A great nation born from his family line, his name carried forward with honor, blessing flowing through him to every corner of the earth. The promises feel almost too wonderful to accept, yet too solid and real to question. The weight of this moment cannot be overstated. Everything in Abram's life has been shaped around stability, around remaining rooted in the familiar soil of his birthplace. His identity is drawn from his place, his people, and his heritage. To leave means tearing away pieces of who he is. Yet something in that voice compels trust in a way nothing else ever has. This is not a human voice capable of deception or regret. This is the voice of truth itself. The word that scattered stars across the heavens and breathed life into dust. When such a voice makes promises, the heart that is wise will listen. Abram feels the pull of two worlds simultaneously. Behind him lies everything known and comfortable, the home where he was raised, the trade he has mastered. The gods his family has always served. These things offer the security of the familiar and the peace of the predictable. Ahead lies the unknown, wrapped in mystery and sealed with promise. A land he has never set eyes on. A future he cannot begin to imagine. A calling that makes no practical sense by any ordinary measure. No map points the way, no guide steps forward to lead the journey, but the voice that is calling him is not a stranger. In ways that go deeper than rational understanding, Abram recognizes this as the voice he has been waiting all his life to hear. The voice that answers the questions his heart has been carrying in silence. The voice of the one true God. The decision comes not through careful strategic reasoning, but through simple trust. Some moments in life call for logic and planning. Others require only the courage to step into mystery, guided by love alone. This is one of those moments for Abram. He does not fully understand what he is agreeing to. He cannot see where the story ends or count the cost of following through. But he recognizes the voice of life itself, calling his name. And his heart responds with the most beautiful word in any language. Yes, the transformation begins at once, though it will take a lifetime to complete. In saying yes to God's call, Abram begins the process of becoming the man God always knew was waiting inside him. The man whose faith would one day pour blessing on every family across the earth. This is how every great journey begins. Not with complete understanding, but with trust. Not with a perfect plan, but with a willing heart. Not with guarantees of smooth sailing, but with promises from the one who always keeps his word. The stars shine a little brighter as Abram makes his choice. The same stars that will one day remind him of God's promise when doubt closes in. The same stars his children's children will gaze at when they look back on this pivotal moment of faith. Tomorrow will bring the hard work of preparation. Tonight brings the deep peace of surrendering to the will of perfect love. Journey to Haran. Dawn breaks as Abram begins the enormous work of leaving everything behind. Servants move quickly through the household, gathering belongings and preparing for a journey that none of them fully understand. The familiar sounds of the city, merchants calling out their goods, children playing in the lanes, craftsmen bent over their work, will soon become nothing more than memories. Terah, Abram's father, decides to join this strange departure. Perhaps he senses that something significant is unfolding, even if he cannot fully grasp the divine calling that is moving his son forward. Family loyalty runs deep in their culture, and where one member goes, others tend to follow. Sarai, Abram's wife, packs their belongings with careful and steady hands. She asks very few questions, choosing to trust her husband's judgment even when the destination remains completely unclear. Her heart holds its own blend of anticipation and fear as she prepares to walk away from the only life she has ever lived. Lot, Abram's nephew, joins the growing caravan as well. Young and hungry for adventure, he sees opportunity in this journey toward unknown lands. The wide world ahead seems full of possibilities, and his uncle's quiet confidence gives him the courage to step out. The family gathers their flocks and herds, their servants and their possessions, everything necessary for life in unfamiliar places. Camels and donkeys carry the goods of the household, while sheep and goats follow along in flowing streams of movement. What began as a single household becomes a small community in motion. Their destination is Haran, a city far to the northwest where trade routes converge and cultures blend together. It sits roughly halfway between the home they left behind and the mysterious land God has promised to reveal to Abram. Perhaps Terah suggests this stopping point, or perhaps God steers them there for reasons not yet made clear. The journey stretches across hundreds of miles through landscapes that are by turns beautiful and brutal. They follow ancient paths, worn smooth by countless caravans before them, pausing at wells and oases where travelers have rested for generations. Each day brings new sights, new difficulties, new reminders of how far they have come from the place they once called home. Desert winds carry sand that stings the eyes and settles between the teeth. The sun bears down without mercy during the daylight hours, while nights bring a cold that pushes through even the warmest blankets. Yet something carries them through all of it. The sense of moving toward a destiny rather than simply running away from comfort. Haran receives them with the energy of a thriving commercial center. Merchants from many nations gather there to exchange goods and news. The air fills with languages Abram recognizes and others completely foreign to his ear. This cosmopolitan atmosphere feels both exciting and overwhelming after the familiar rhythms of his home city. The family settles into their new surroundings, finding a place to live, establishing routines that make a strange land feel more like home. Terah seems content with the arrangement, perhaps believing that the journey has arrived at its natural ending point. Haran offers prosperity and opportunity, a pleasant enough place to spend whatever years remain. But Abram carries within his chest the memory of a voice and the quiet echo of promises not yet fulfilled. Haran feels like a pause in the story rather than its final destination. The land God promised to show him lies farther west, beyond horizons he has not yet reached. Years pass in this in-between place. Terah grows older, his hair white as new wool, his steps slower than in the strong days before the long desert journey wore down his aging body. Though his spirit holds steady, he finds a kind of peace in watching his family settle and prosper in their adopted home. Then comes the day when Terah's long life reaches its quiet end. The man who shaped idols in Ur, who followed his son into the unknown, breathes his last breath in a foreign land. His passing marks the close of one chapter and the opening of another in God's unfolding story. Grief mingles with a strange sense of release as Abram buries his father in the soil of Haran. The ties binding him to the past grow a little lighter. The voice that called him from Ur whispers again in his heart, reminding him that the journey is not finished and the promise is not yet fulfilled. Haran has been a place of transition, a necessary resting point between the life he walked away from and the life waiting ahead of him. There he learned to trust God's provision in unfamiliar territory. There he discovered that home is not a location but a relationship with the one who guides every single step. The time has come to leave Haran behind, to move deeper into the unknown. The real journey is only just beginning. Into Canaan. The morning sun paints the hills of Canaan in shades of gold and green as Abram crests the final ridge of his long journey. Before him spreads a land of rolling meadows and ancient olive groves where streams run clear and the air carries the fragrance of wildflowers. This is the place God promised to show him, and it surpasses every picture his imagination had drawn. Yet, as his caravan descends into the valleys below, Abram quickly learns that he is not entering empty land. People have lived here for generations. Their settlements dot the landscape like islands scattered across a green sea. The Canaanites have built their cities and cultivated their fields, established their customs, and claimed their territories long ago. These encounters with local tribes play out through careful diplomacy. Abram approaches as a peaceful nomad seeking grazing rights and access to water, not as a conqueror asserting ownership. The Canaanites observe this wealthy stranger with a mixture of curiosity and caution, uncertain what has drawn him to their ancestral lands. Some meetings go smoothly, sealed with gifts and mutual respect. Tribal leaders recognize that Abram's large household brings both opportunity and complication. His trade goods are welcome, but his flocks will compete for the same pasture. Negotiations require wisdom and patience as two very different cultures learn to occupy the same space. Other encounters prove more tense. Not every tribe welcomes outsiders, even those who come in peace. Some regard Abram's wealth with suspicion or barely concealed envy. Others fear that a temporary visitor might quietly become a permanent neighbor. Surviving in this land means reading faces carefully and honoring unspoken boundaries. Through all of it, Abram carries the echo of divine promise in his heart. "To your offspring I will give this land," God had said. Though the timing and the method remain wrapped in mystery, for now he lives as a guest among people who consider themselves the rightful owners, trusting that God's word will prove itself true in the proper season. The nomadic life begins in full, as Abram learns to follow the seasons and the grass. When pastures thin out in one area, the entire household folds up and moves toward fresh grazing. Tents become home, while permanent buildings remain the privilege of settled peoples. This constant movement teaches lasting lessons about holding possessions loosely. What cannot be carried must be left behind. What serves no practical purpose becomes a burden. Life strips down to its essentials: shelter, sustenance, and the relationships that make survival possible and meaningful. At significant locations throughout Canaan, Abram builds altars to honor the God who called him out of Ur. These stone monuments mark important moments and places, creating a geography of faith across the landscape. Each altar holds a story of divine encounter, of promises received and trust renewed. The altar near Shechem stands where God first appeared to Abram in Canaan, confirming the promise with a visible presence. Another rises at Bethel, where heaven seemed to press close to earth during a particularly clear night of prayer. These sacred spaces become anchors for the soul in a life of constant movement. Building these altars also serves as a kind of testimony to the people around him. Unlike the elaborate temples honoring many gods, Abram's simple stone structures honor one deity alone, the invisible God who speaks with authority and keeps every promise he makes. Some Canaanites approach these altars with genuine curiosity, sensing that something about this stranger's faith is different from anything they have encountered before. The rhythm of nomadic life soon becomes deeply familiar. Dawn brings the bleating of goats and the lowing of cattle, as servants begin preparing for another day of grazing. Evening calls the flocks home to safety, while families gather around fires to share food and stories. Children learn to walk on uneven ground, to help with simple tasks, to find wonder in a landscape that is always changing. They grow up knowing that home is not a building but a family, not a place but a presence. This mobile life shapes character in ways that settled existence simply cannot. Abram's household grows in both numbers and influence as word spreads of his fair dealing and generous spirit. Some locals join his company, drawn by opportunity or by simple respect for who he is. His reputation as a man of integrity opens doors that might otherwise have stayed shut. The promise of land seems at once near and far as months turn into years in Canaan. Near because Abram walks its paths every day, knows its seasons intimately, and loves its beauty deeply. Far because he remains a tenant rather than an owner, dependent on the goodwill of others for grazing rights and access to water. But faith learns to live in that tension, holding earthly realities loosely while gripping divine promises firmly. God's timing rarely aligns with human expectations, yet his faithfulness never wavers. The land will belong to Abram's descendants in God's perfect time. For now, it is enough to dwell in the place of promise, to walk the ground where future generations will build their cities, to worship the true God in a land that does not yet know his name. Famine and flight to Egypt. The rains failed to arrive that year in Canaan. Week after week, the sky holds clear and hard as polished bronze, offering no relief to the thirsty earth below. Grass withers and streams slow to a trickle, then vanish altogether. What started as a dry season grows into a desperate drought, threatening every living thing in the land. Abram watches his flocks grow gaunt, their ribs pressing through dusty coats as they search for any green thing left to eat. Servants dig deeper into wells that yielded clean water just months before, finding only mud and stones. Children lift their eyes to the sky each morning, hoping for clouds that never come. The local Canaanites face the same crisis. Their herds are suffering, their crops are failing. Competition for the few remaining resources grows fierce as survival overrides the courtesies of peaceful coexistence. Whatever water remains has become more precious than gold or silver. In this desperate hour, Abram faces a choice that tests the very foundations of his faith. God brought him to this land on the strength of promises of blessing, yet the land itself now seems to oppose his presence. Should he stay and trust in divine provision, or should he take action to preserve his family and his flocks? Word reaches him through passing travelers that Egypt remains lush and fertile, sustained by the annual flooding of the great Nile River. While Canaan suffers, Egypt enjoys abundance. The contrast seems almost to mock God's promise, raising questions that Abram does not dare speak aloud but cannot push away. The decision to travel to Egypt arrives through practical necessity rather than divine direction. Abram hears no voice from heaven, either commanding or forbidding the journey south. He must act on wisdom and a sense of responsibility, hoping that God understands the pressures that come with leading a large household through desperate times. The preparations for the journey to Egypt unfold with heavy hearts. This feels different from all the departures before it. Not a step forward in faith, but a retreat from promise. The very land God led them to has now pushed them to seek refuge somewhere else. The irony presses down hard. Yet as the caravan moves south toward Egypt, the relief of green appears in the distance, first as a faint line on the horizon, then as a rich band of vegetation marking the life-giving path of the Nile. Water flows freely there, supporting fields of grain and gardens full of vegetables. But Egypt carries its own dangers, as Abram quickly begins to grasp. Sarai's beauty, well preserved despite the years of their marriage, draws unwanted attention in this foreign court. Egyptian customs differ sharply from those of Canaan, and a foreign woman bound to a foreign man might face threats unlike anything encountered in more familiar territory. Fear creeps into Abram's heart like a cold wind moving through a tent. What if the Egyptians decide to remove him in order to take his beautiful wife for themselves? In a land where he has no family connections, no tribal backing, no legal standing, such a danger feels terrifyingly real. The deception that follows unfolds almost organically, born of fear rather than deliberate dishonesty. When Egyptian officials ask about the lovely woman traveling with him, Abram presents Sarai as his sister rather than his wife. Technically accurate, since she is his half-sister, but deeply false in its purpose to mislead. The plan succeeds beyond anything he anticipated. Pharaoh himself takes notice of Sarai's beauty and brings her into the royal household, pouring gifts on Abram as a gesture of goodwill toward her apparent brother. Sheep and cattle, servants and camels flow into Abram's camp, making him wealthier than he has ever been. But prosperity gained through deception carries its own poison. Abram accumulates material wealth while suffering spiritual damage, his conscience troubled by the lies that produced such apparent abundance. Sarai endures a situation she never chose, paying the full price for her husband's fear-driven decision. Divine intervention arrives in the form of serious illnesses that sweep through Pharaoh's household. The Egyptian ruler, wise in the ways of his people, recognizes these afflictions as something beyond the natural order. Investigation uncovers the truth about Sarai's identity and Abram's deception. Pharaoh's response shows a remarkable degree of restraint and wisdom. Rather than having the foreign deceiver executed, he summons Abram for a royal confrontation. "What have you done to me?" he demands. "Why did you not tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she was your sister?" The questions hang in the air like a formal indictment, each one exposing the moral failure of God's chosen man. Abram has no defense beyond his fear, no justification beyond his desperate desire to protect himself. He stands exposed before a pagan king who in this moment demonstrates more integrity than he himself has shown. Yet even in this moment of humiliation, God's protection remains visible. Pharaoh could have punished Abram harshly. He could have kept Sarai for himself. He could have taken back everything gained through deception. Instead, he orders them to leave Egypt with all their possessions intact. The journey back to Canaan unfolds in an uncomfortable quiet. Each mile marks the distance between who Abram currently is and who he is called to become. The famine that drove them to Egypt has ended. The rains have come back, but the lessons absorbed through failure will echo for generations. Return and wealth. The hills of Canaan welcome Abram home with rolling green pastures and streams flowing clear and sweet after the blessed rains. The famine has ended as suddenly as it came, leaving the land refreshed and full of life. Wildflowers spread across the meadows in brilliant colors, while new grass provides rich grazing for the returning herds. Yet Abram's heart carries burdens heavier than all the wealth he brought back from Egypt. The gold and silver, the servants and livestock that fill his caravan represent both divine blessing and personal failure bound together in the same bundle. Sarai rides beside him in thoughtful quiet, her heart still working through the weight of those months in Pharaoh's palace. She endured what no wife should ever face because her husband's faith wavered at the critical moment. Though they are reunited now, some wounds require time to close. Some trust has to be rebuilt slowly and with patience. The servants murmur quietly among themselves about the strange ways of their master's God. This deity, whom none of them had seen or heard directly, somehow struck down the powerful Pharaoh of Egypt in order to protect one foreign woman. Such power commands both respect and wonder in those who witnessed its effects. Lot travels with his uncle's enlarged household, his own flocks and herds having multiplied during their time in Egypt. The young man's eyes carry the gleam of ambition as he surveys their combined wealth. Two households have grown prosperous enough to rival local chieftains, a development that will soon generate new complications. Abram returns first to Bethel, where he built an altar before the journey south to Egypt. The stone structure stands unchanged, weathered but firm, a silent witness to simpler days when trust came more readily. There he calls on the name of the Lord, seeking renewal of a relationship strained by recent choices. Prayer pours from a humbled heart as Abram kneels beside his altar. The words come haltingly at first, weighted with shame and regret, but grace steps forward to meet confession, and peace begins to replace the unrest that has followed him since Egypt. The land surrounding Bethel teems with life as both households settle back into the rhythms of their nomadic existence. Servants pitch tents and establish camps, while herders guide animals to fresh pastures. The abundance of grass and water makes the recent famine feel like a distant nightmare. But prosperity has its own complications. Abram's servants and Lot's servants begin arguing over grazing rights and access to water. What appeared like more than enough when viewed from a distance proves insufficient when divided between two large households. Competition produces resentment, and resentment left unchecked threatens to erupt into open conflict. The disputes begin small. Arguments over which flock drinks first at a particular well or whose animals have laid claim to a choice meadow. But small conflicts grow larger when nothing is done to address them, especially among men whose entire livelihoods depend on the welfare of their animals. Abram watches these tensions build with growing concern. His relationship with Lot means more to him than any possession or any piece of land. Yet their mutual prosperity is threatening to tear apart the family bond they have always shared. The nephew he loves like a son is becoming a rival through no fault of either man. The wealth that seemed like God's blessing is now revealing its capacity to divide. Riches can fracture families just as easily as they provide security. Success can generate conflicts that poverty never imagined. The very abundance God provided now threatens the peace God desires. Servants report these quarrels to their masters with increasing frequency. Sharp words are exchanged, boundaries are disputed, and tempers catch fire in the desert heat. Neighboring tribes observe these internal conflicts with growing interest, perhaps calculating what advantage might come from a permanent split between two wealthy kinsmen. Abram recognizes that something must be done before the damage becomes permanent. Family unity matters more than financial position. Peace between kinsmen outweighs any prosperity that comes at the cost of relationship. Love must find a solution where logic alone falls short. The resolution will require sacrifice from someone. Either both households must find a way to share limited resources, or they must separate and find abundance in different directions. Neither option appeals to Abram's heart, but both seem far better than allowing the conflict to continue. Prayer grows more urgent as the situation worsens. The God who called him from Ur, who protected him in Egypt, who blessed him with abundance, must surely hold wisdom for this dilemma. The faith that stumbled in Egypt now reaches again for renewal in this moment of family crisis. The answer, when it comes, will catch everyone off guard with its generosity and wisdom. But first, Abram must find the courage to act out of love rather than self-interest, to live out the kind of faith that places relationships above riches. Lot's settlement in Sodom. Morning light falls across the Jordan Valley as Abram leads Lot to the high ground, overlooking the land they have been disputing. Below them stretches a view of breathtaking beauty. The river bends like a silver ribbon through fertile plains, while cities catch the sunlight in the distance like jewels laid out across green cloth. "Look around you," Abram says with quiet dignity, sweeping his hand across the panoramic view. "Choose whichever direction you want. If you go left, I will take the right. If you prefer the right, I will take the left. Let us part ways so our families can live in peace." The offer reveals Abram's character at its most generous. As the elder, he holds every right to claim first choice of the best available land. As Lot's uncle and the one who has provided for him, he might reasonably expect some deference to his preferences. Instead, he surrenders his claim entirely for the sake of family peace, trusting God to provide whatever portion remains for him. Lot's eyes move across the options with the measured look of a man who understands opportunity. To the west lie the hill country and the challenges it brings. Beautiful terrain but demanding, requiring real effort to make it productive. To the east, the Jordan Valley opens wide, lush, well-watered, and unmistakably fertile, practically presenting itself as the obvious choice. The decision seems straightforward from any practical angle. The Jordan Valley resembles the Garden of Eden in its natural richness, blessed with rivers and deep soil that promise easy prosperity. Cities already standing there offer opportunities for trade and cultural engagement. "I will take the Jordan Valley," Lot announces, his choice made with swift confidence. The words carry no ill will, but they reveal priorities that will soon produce consequences he never anticipated. He chooses based on what looks best to the eye, rather than what wisdom might counsel, on material advantage, rather than any deeper consideration. Abram accepts this choice in gracious silence, though his heart surely feels the sting of being left with the apparently less desirable portion. The hill country may hold less obvious wealth, but it will prove richer in ways that neither gold nor silver can measure. The parting unfolds with embraces and blessings, family love tempering the sadness of necessary separation. Lot collects his household and his possessions, his servants and his animals, and prepares to move toward his chosen inheritance. The spirit of adventure rises in him as he sets out. As Lot's caravan disappears toward the Jordan Valley, Abram watches from the heights until the dust clouds fade into the shimmering distance. Solitude settles around him like a familiar cloak, but somehow heavier than before. The nephew who shared his journey from Ur now walks a different road. Lot's chosen destination turns out to be Sodom, the most prosperous city in the Jordan Valley. Its markets burst with activity, its buildings rise in impressive displays of construction. Its culture offers a level of sophistication unknown in nomadic camps. Everything about it suggests that Lot has made the shrewder choice, yet something darker lives beneath Sodom's appealing surface. The city's prosperity has cultivated moral corruption alongside its wealth. Its sophistication has bred spiritual darkness alongside its refinement. The very abundance that drew Lot like a magnet carries within it the seeds of ruin. The people of Sodom have grown rich through trade and agriculture, but their wealth has led them far from any sense of righteousness. They crush the poor, ignore the suffering of those in need, and indulge in practices that would cause angels to weep. Their city may gleam like gold on the outside, but it reeks in the nostrils of heaven. Lot settles his family near Sodom at first, perhaps planning to keep some distance from the city's influence while still drawing on its economic advantages. But proximity to temptation has a way of becoming participation, and before long he finds himself living inside Sodom's walls. The movement happens so gradually it is almost impossible to identify a single moment when it turned. First, he trades in Sodom's markets. Then he attends its festivals. Finally, he establishes full residence among its citizens. Each individual step appears reasonable on its own, but together they form a path leading steadily away from the values that once shaped his decisions. His wife and daughters take to city life enthusiastically, enjoying its comforts and conveniences after years of living in tents under open skies. The nomadic life they once knew begins to seem rough and primitive by comparison with Sodom's urban ease. But comfort purchased at the price of righteousness always ends up costing more than expected. The city's moral atmosphere seeps into their hearts like slow poison, eroding their values and chipping away at their integrity. They gain a city, but place their souls at risk. Meanwhile, Abram remains in the hill country, dwelling in tents, holding to the nomadic way of life that keeps his heart fixed on eternal rather than temporary things. His apparent loss becomes his greatest gain. His willingness to sacrifice becomes his richest reward. The contrast between the two men's paths will soon be made unmistakably clear. Lot chose what human eyes could see and found it destructive to the human soul. Abram accepted what seemed lesser and received the approval of heaven in return. This story carries its wisdom quietly but firmly across every generation. Appearances deceive, prosperity tempts, and the road that leads to immediate satisfaction often ends in ultimate sorrow. The best choice is not always the one that looks most obvious. God's Covenant, Part 1. Silence wraps around Abram's tent like a gentle covering as evening settles over the hill country of Canaan. The flocks have come in, the servants have finished their work, and a deep calm rests over the camp. Yet within Abram's heart, questions move like restless winds across open desert. Lot's departure continues to weigh on his spirit, not only because of the loneliness it has brought, but because of what it represents. The nephew who once shared the dream of divine promise has chosen earthly gain over heavenly blessing. The family that journeyed together from Ur has divided, leaving Abram to sit alone with the cost of following God's call. Years have passed since the voice first spoke in Ur, promising descendants as numerous as the stars and a great nation rising from his line. Yet Sarai remains without child, her womb closed despite persistent prayers and years of faithful waiting. How can God fulfill promises of countless offspring when the first requirement, a single child, remains out of reach? The irony cuts with a quiet and persistent edge. Lot, who received no specific divine promise, prospers with children and wealth in the fertile valley below. Abram, the one chosen to carry heaven's blessing, lives childless among the hills, his inheritance apparently limited to the dust under his feet. These thoughts cycle through his mind as darkness deepens across the land. The weight of divine calling sometimes feels heavier than its blessing, especially when visible evidence of God's favor seems to be thinning. Faith demands trust precisely when what can be seen offers the least encouragement. Then, like sunrise breaking through the heart of a storm, the word of the Lord comes to Abram in a vision. Not the quiet murmur of wishful thinking, but the unmistakable voice of divine authority speaking directly into his troubled heart. Do not be afraid, Abram. The voice opens with infinite tenderness, addressing his deepest fears head-on. Fear that he has chosen wrongly. Fear that God has allowed his promises to slip away. Fear that faith has carried him into nothing but futility. I am your shield, God continues, painting a portrait of protection that no earthly force could replicate. In a world where strength determines survival and the weak fall before the powerful, this divine assurance offers a security beyond anything human might can provide. Your very great reward, the promise closes, suggesting riches that reach beyond gold and silver, not simply payment for faithful service, but the deep and settled satisfaction of walking in perfect alignment with divine purpose. Yet honesty compels Abram to voice the question that has been burning in his chest. Sovereign Lord, he responds with respectful boldness, what can you give me since I remain childless? The one who stands to inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus. The reply reveals both his humanity and his pain in equal measure. Years of waiting have worn down his early confidence. The promise of descendants seems to mock him every day as he watches his servant Eliezer manage household affairs with the efficiency of a natural heir. A servant born in my household will be my heir, Abram continues, his voice edged with resignation. But God's response sweeps that kind of limited thinking aside with the force of divine creativity. This man will not be your heir, the voice declares with gentle firmness. The practical solution Abram's mind has constructed dissolves before the superior wisdom of heaven. A son who comes from your own body will be your heir. God promises, speaking life into dead situations and hope into desperate circumstances. The very impossibility that has haunted his prayers becomes the ground on which divine power will make its clearest demonstration. Then comes the moment that will travel through generations. God leads Abram out of his tent, away from the limiting walls of human reasoning and into the vast openness of a star-filled night. Look up at the sky, God commands, with the quiet authority of the one who placed every light there. Count the stars, if you are able to count them. Abram's eyes lift to the display overhead. Countless points of light break through the darkness, extending beyond the farthest reach of human vision. Each star speaks of divine power. Each constellation declares infinite creative capacity. So shall your offspring be, God promises, connecting Abram's future to the very fabric of the night sky. Not just many descendants, but descendants beyond all counting. As numerous as the stars spreading from one horizon to the other, the promise staggers the mind while satisfying the heart at the same time. From a childless old man and his barren wife will rise a multitude that mirrors the glory of the heavens. The impossible becomes inevitable when spoken by the voice that commands galaxies. Faith rises in Abram's heart like water drawn up from a deep and clean well, refreshing after a long drought. The evidence of his senses, his age, Sarai's barrenness, the years that have kept moving past, all of it dissolves before the evidence of God's character and power. Scripture captures the profound simplicity of what happens next. Abram believed the Lord. No complex theology, no detailed understanding of how the promise would unfold, simply trust in the one who spoke the stars into existence and now promises to multiply his offspring to match them. This moment of faith becomes the foundation for everything that follows, not faith in circumstances, which remain completely unchanged, but faith in the character of God, which never moves. Not trust in human ability, which has reached its outer limit, but trust in divine power, which knows no boundary. The stars continue their ancient movement overhead as Abram makes his way back to his tent. But something has shifted at a fundamental level in his relationship with God. The promise has been renewed. The covenant has been confirmed. The future has been secured by a word that cannot be taken back. The War of Kings. Dawn arrives, carrying disturbing news to Abram's camp in the form of breathless messengers. Ragged clothes, covered in the dust of desperate travel. The words these messengers speak shatter the quiet morning like boulders hurled into calm water. War has broken out across the Jordan Valley, and Lot has been taken prisoner. The conflict draws in powerful kings whose names carry authority throughout the ancient world. Chedorlaomer of Elam leads a coalition of eastern rulers who have driven westward to crush a rebellion among the city-states of the Jordan Valley. Sodom and Gomorrah, together with their allies, had dared to shake off the burden of tribute after 12 years of submission. The battle proved as quick as it was complete. The eastern kings swept through the valley like a rushing torrent, overwhelming local defenses with superior numbers and battle-hardened experience. City after city collapsed before their advance, their treasuries looted, their people scattered or seized. Lot, who had chosen Sodom for its apparent safety and abundance, now finds himself a prisoner of war. The nephew who sought comfort behind city walls discovers that human fortifications offer no protection against divine judgment working through earthly armies. Abram's response uncovers the warrior spirit hidden beneath his shepherd's exterior. Despite their recent parting of ways, despite Lot's selection of the better land, family loyalty blazes stronger than personal injury. Blood draws blood toward blood, and love reaches beyond past disappointments. The decision to chase down trained armies with a household force of shepherds and servants seems like madness to any practical observer. Abram commands only 318 trained men born within his household, a small force set against the combined strength of 4 victorious kings and their professional soldiers. Yet, sometimes the impossible becomes achievable when everyday courage encounters divine favor. Abram's men may lack battlefield experience, but they carry something far more valuable: complete loyalty to their master and unwavering trust in his God. Preparations for battle unfold with careful planning and urgent prayer. Weapons must be collected, strategies discussed, routes charted through unfamiliar territory. Every detail matters when pursuing enemies who hold every visible advantage. The chase leads northward toward Dan, where the retreating armies pause to divide their plunder and mark their victories. Confidence makes them careless. Success breeds complacency. They make camp without adequate guards, assuming no force capable of challenging them exists anywhere in this region. Divine wisdom shapes Abram's tactics as he splits his small company for a nighttime strike. Attacking from several directions at once, his men create confusion that multiplies their effectiveness many times over. In the darkness, noise and panic become weapons more powerful than swords. The battle erupts with fierce intensity as Abram's household warriors descend upon the unsuspecting camp. Shouts of alarm tear through the night as soldiers scramble for weapons and armor. The carefully organized army dissolves into a mob of panicked men, scattering in every direction. Victory arrives swiftly and completely. The mighty coalition that had conquered the Jordan Valley crumbles before a force less than 1/10 its size. Divine intervention transforms the battlefield, proving that God's favor outweighs human military strength. Lot steps out of captivity, shaken but unharmed. His family and possessions are recovered, along with the treasures of Sodom. The young man who had chosen earthly security learns that genuine safety comes only through walking in covenant with the Almighty. Other freed captives celebrate their unexpected liberation as Abram's men gather the scattered spoils of war. Gold and silver, weapons and livestock, all the wealth the eastern kings had pillaged now lies available for the taking. But the most significant encounter still awaits Abram on his journey home. Near Jerusalem, a mysterious figure steps forward. Melchizedek, king of Salem and priest of God Most High. This man holds royal and priestly authority together in ways that suggest divine appointment. Melchizedek brings bread and wine to refresh the victorious warriors. But his true gift rests in the blessing he pronounces. Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, he declares with prophetic weight. The blessing continues with recognition of divine intervention in the recent battle. And praised be God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hand. These words confirm what Abram's heart already understood. The triumph belongs to God, not to human strength. In response, Abram gives Melchizedek a tenth of all the recovered plunder. This tithe means more than gratitude for blessing received. It acknowledges Melchizedek's spiritual authority and affirms the principle that all victory ultimately belongs to God. The encounter with Melchizedek reshapes the meaning of military success. What began as a rescue mission becomes a spiritual landmark, a moment when heaven makes contact with earth through human vessels. The mysterious priest-king vanishes as suddenly as he appeared, leaving only blessing behind him. When the king of Sodom approaches to reclaim his people and possessions, Abram demonstrates integrity that surprises and humbles the pagan ruler. "Give me the people and keep the goods for yourself," the king offers, following the standard customs of war. But Abram's response reveals a character formed by divine encounter. "With raised hand, I have sworn an oath to the Lord God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, that I will accept nothing belonging to you, not even a thread or the strap of a sandal." This refusal safeguards both God's reputation and Abram's integrity. Let no one say that the king of Sodom made Abram wealthy. Let all who hear this account understand that blessing comes from heaven alone, not from human benefactors or earthly alliances. The war that began in tragedy ends in triumph. The rescue that seemed beyond reach becomes testimony to divine power. Abram returns home, carrying more than a rescued family. He carries the memory of God's faithfulness in battle and the firm assurance that heaven's promises remain secure. Covenant, ritual, and divine promise. Darkness falls across the ancient land. Abraham stands alone, waiting for God to speak. The silence stretches on and on. Stars emerge one by one in the desert sky overhead. Earlier that same day, God had spoken words that stirred something deep within Abraham's soul. "Do not fear, Abram. I am your shield. Your reward will be very great." But Abraham's response came from a place of honest sorrow. "Lord God, what will you give me? I remain without a child. A servant born in my house will inherit everything I own." The ache within those words carries across centuries. Here stands a man promised offspring like stars, yet his tent remains silent. No laughter of children fills the evening air, no son speaks his name. The weight of unfulfilled promises can break even the strongest faith. God's reply arrives gentle but firm. "This servant will not be your heir. A son from your own body will inherit all that you have." Then comes the invitation that transforms everything. "Look toward the heavens, count the stars if you are able to number them, so shall your descendants be." Abraham lifts his gaze toward the vast canopy above. Countless points of light pierce the dark. Each star stands in for a life not yet born. Each point of light holds a future he cannot begin to picture. The promise feels impossible, yet something within him chooses to believe. Scripture tells us plainly, he believed the Lord, and the Lord counted it to him as righteousness. But faith, even strong faith, longs for understanding. Abraham voices the question that lives in every human heart. "Lord God, how may I know that I will possess this land?" It is not doubt speaking. It is a soul reaching for confirmation of what seems beyond all belief. God's answer arrives through symbols older than language itself. "Bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon." Abraham gathers each animal with great care. This is no ordinary sacrifice. Something profound is about to take place. With practiced hands, Abraham takes each larger animal and divides it in two. He arranges the halves opposite each other, creating a pathway between them. The smaller birds remain whole. Blood soaks down into the earth. The scene resembles something from an ancient ritual, yet divine purpose moves through every detail. Ancient covenant-making followed patterns that have grown foreign to modern minds. When two parties formed binding agreements, they would walk together between the pieces of sacrificed animals. The message was unmistakable. "May this fate come upon the one who breaks this covenant." Both parties shared the risk. Both committed themselves to the terms. As sunset draws near, birds of prey drop down upon the carcasses. Abraham drives them away, again and again. The symbolism runs deep. Forces of evil always seek to devour God's promises. Faith demands constant watchfulness. The enemy never rests. When the sun finally sinks below the horizon, a deep sleep falls upon Abraham. But this is no ordinary slumber. A thick and terrifying darkness presses down over him. In this supernatural state, God speaks words that will echo through all the generations to come. Know for certain that your offspring will be strangers in a land not their own. They will serve there and be afflicted for 400 years. But I will judge the nation they serve, and afterward they shall come out with great possessions. The future unfolds in divine revelation. Slavery in Egypt, suffering and oppression. Yet deliverance will come. The promise holds both hardship and rescue together. God's plans move through centuries, not decades. More words flow from the divine lips. As for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried at a good old age, and they shall come back here in the 4th generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. Even judgment follows a timetable. God waits for wickedness to reach its full measure before he acts. Mercy and justice move together in ways that human understanding can barely begin to grasp. Then arrives the moment that turns covenant into certainty. When complete darkness blankets the land, a smoking firepot and a flaming torch pass between the pieces. Abraham watches in awe as God alone walks the covenant path. No human footsteps accompany the divine procession. The meaning staggers the heart. In typical covenants, both parties risked everything. Here, God alone carries the risk. If this promise is ever broken, may God himself be torn apart like these animals. The Almighty stakes his own existence on keeping his word to Abraham. The torch disappears into the darkness. The smoke from the firepot drifts away on desert winds. But the covenant remains forever. Cut in blood, sealed in mystery, guaranteed by God himself. Abraham wakes, transformed. The stars still shine above, but now they carry entirely different meaning. Each one stands for a child not yet born. Each glimmer holds a promise, backed by divine sacrifice. The impossible has become inevitable. Years will pass before Isaac's birth. Decades will unfold before the promise begins its full flowering. But tonight, in this place between the pieces, eternity has touched time. A covenant has been cut that will outlast all kingdoms and empires. The ancient ritual speaks across thousands of years. When God makes a promise, he stakes everything on keeping it. When divine love commits itself to human hearts, nothing in heaven or earth can sever that bond. The smoking firepot and the flaming torch have walked between the pieces. The covenant stands forever. Sarai's doubt and Hagar's introduction. 10 years have passed since God's promise rang out beneath star-filled skies. 10 years of waiting, 10 years of hoping, 10 years of watching Sarai's face grow more shadowed with each passing moon. The covenant burns bright in Abraham's memory, but daily life carries different burdens. Sarai moves through their tent with quiet efficiency. Her hands stay busy grinding grain, weaving cloth, directing servants. But her eyes hold depths of pain that words cannot reach. She is 75 years old. Her body has never carried life. The monthly reminder of her barrenness has become a familiar and cruel companion. The promise weighs on her differently than it does on Abraham. He heard God's voice directly. Divine words fell upon his ears like rain on parched ground. But Sarai received the promise second-hand. Hope filtered through her husband's account. Faith grows harder when it reaches you through someone else's experience. She watches other women in the neighboring camps, sees their children running freely among the tents, hears their laughter, their gentle scolding, their bedtime songs drifting through the evening air. Each sound cuts deeper than the one before. The promise of descendants like stars feels almost cruel when her own womb remains sealed. Cultural pressure adds its own weight to personal sorrow. In this ancient world, a woman's value was often measured by the children she produced. A barren wife brought shame not only to herself, but to her husband's entire household. Sarai carries this burden like stones pressed against her heart. Yet within Sarai's household walks a young Egyptian woman whose presence offers both a solution and a temptation. Hagar had come with them from Egypt years earlier, likely a gift from Pharaoh when Abraham's deception had been discovered. She is young, strong, and fertile. Everything Sarai feels she herself is not. The idea forms slowly in Sarai's mind. Ancient customs offered ways around barrenness. A wife could present her maidservant to her husband. Any children born from that arrangement would legally belong to the wife. It was accepted practice, even anticipated in certain circles. But knowing something is culturally acceptable does not make it emotionally simple. Sarai wrestles with thoughts she never expected to entertain. To hand her husband over to another woman, even for practical purposes, tears at something deep within her soul. Abraham remains faithful to God's promise, but he also loves his wife deeply. He sees her pain. He watches her grow more desperate with each passing season. When she finally comes to him with her proposal, he faces an impossible choice. "The Lord has prevented me from bearing children," Sarai says, her words heavy with resignation. "Go in to my servant. It may be that I shall obtain children through her." The phrasing sounds measured, but the heart behind it bleeds with mingled hope and heartbreak. This moment reveals the beautiful complexity of human faith. Sarai believes God's promise enough to act. She trusts that Abraham will indeed have descendants, but she assumes she herself cannot be part of that promise's fulfillment. Her faith is real, but incomplete. Abraham finds himself caught between divine promise and human love. God spoke of a son from his own body, but gave no details about the mother. Perhaps this is how the promise will come to pass. Perhaps Sarai's plan aligns with heaven's design. The reasoning sounds logical, even spiritual, but logic and God's intentions do not always intersect where human minds expect them to. Divine timing operates on entirely different schedules than human desperation. God's methods frequently surprise those who believe they understand his intentions. Hagar enters this story not as a villain, but as a victim of circumstance. She has no say in what happens next. Ancient law gave maidservants no voice in such decisions. Her body becomes an instrument for others' longings. Her future is shaped by desires she never expressed. Yet even in this complicated situation, God sees Hagar. The Egyptian girl matters to heaven. Her tears register. Her fears are known in the divine consciousness. She is not merely a means to someone else's end, but a person with her own relationship to the Almighty. The arrangement moves forward with all the emotional complications one might expect. Hagar conceives quickly. Life stirs within her body, the life Sarai has ached to carry for decades. Joy and bitterness twist together in ways that poison the household's peace. Pregnancy shifts Hagar's view of her mistress. The text tells us plainly that when she saw she had conceived, she looked on her mistress with contempt. Power shifts. When the barren woman must depend on the fertile servant, Hagar's scorn cuts deeply into Sarai's already wounded heart. Sarai's response lays bare the depth of her pain. "May the wrong done to me fall on you," she tells Abraham. "I gave my servant into your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. May the Lord judge between you and me." The blame spreads like spilled oil across stone. Sarai blames Abraham. Abraham effectively abandons Hagar to Sarai's harsh treatment. Everyone suffers. No one finds the peace they were searching for. Human attempts to fulfill divine promises frequently create more problems than they resolve. When we run ahead of God's timing, even with good intentions, complications multiply. Sarai's plan made sense by human standards. It addressed practical problems, but it could not touch the deeper issue of trust. The stage is now set for drama that will echo through generations. Two women, one carrying a child by divine promise and one by human initiative, will soon share the same household. Their sons will carry both blessing and tension forward into the world. Faith and flesh prepare for collision. Ishmael is born. The wilderness stretches endlessly in every direction. Hot sand shifts beneath Hagar's feet as she stumbles forward, driven by desperation and tears. Behind her lies the only home she has known for years. Ahead waits uncertainty, danger, perhaps death. But anything feels better than Sarai's harsh treatment. The pregnancy makes the journey harder. Life grows within her body. Abraham's child, the first fruit of his flesh. Yet this blessing has become her curse. Sarai's jealousy burns hotter than the desert sun. Each day brings fresh cruelties and new humiliations. Finally, Hagar can bear no more. She flees into the wilderness in the direction of Egypt, her homeland. Perhaps her own people will welcome her back. Perhaps she can raise this child far from the tensions that poison Abraham's camp. The hope seems thin, but it is all she has left. Desert travel tests, even experienced travelers to their limits. For a pregnant servant girl traveling alone, it approaches suicide. Water runs short. The sun beats without mercy overhead. Her feet blister and crack. Exhaustion presses heavy on her shoulders. Yet she pushes herself onward, driven by pain far greater than physical discomfort. Near a spring along the road to Egypt, her strength finally gives out. She stops beside the water, overwhelmed by the impossibility of her situation. Where can she go? What future awaits her child? The questions have no answers she can see. Then comes the voice that changes everything. Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going? The words carry authority wrapped in gentleness. Someone has found her in this desolate place. She looks up to find a figure who both comforts and awes her. An angel of the Lord stands before her, God's own messenger in human form. In her darkest hour, heaven has noticed her plight. She is not as alone as she had believed. I am fleeing from my mistress Sarai, she answers with honesty. No point in deception here. This being clearly knows more than he is asking. The angel's response catches her off guard. Return to your mistress and submit to her. The command asks her to do the very thing she fled to escape. Return to harsh treatment, submit to jealous cruelty, accept a subordinate position within the household's complicated relationships. But the command arrives accompanied by a promise. I will surely multiply your offspring so that they cannot be numbered for multitude. The same language God used with Abraham now extends to her unborn child. This pregnancy carries significance far beyond household conflict. More promises pour out like water from the spring beside her. Behold, you are pregnant and shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has heard your affliction. The name means God hears. Even in her pain, even in her status as a servant, heaven is paying attention. The angel describes her son's future with words both stirring and sobering. He shall be a wild donkey of a man, his hand against everyone and everyone's hand against him, and he shall dwell over against all his kinsmen. Freedom and conflict will mark his path. He will bow to no one, but find peace with few. These prophecies stretch far beyond one woman's immediate crisis. Nations will rise from this child's lineage. Peoples not yet born will trace their history back to this moment beside a desert spring. Hagar is carrying more than a baby. She bears the future within her. The encounter transforms her understanding of both herself and her situation. She is not forgotten. God sees her tears, hears her cries, and knows her name. The realization moves her to worship. You are a God of seeing, she declares, giving the Lord a name born entirely from personal experience. She names the well Bir Lahai Roi, the well of the living one who sees me. The place becomes a landmark of divine compassion. Generations will remember that God notices the forgotten, hears the voiceless, and sees those others overlook. Hagar returns to Abraham's household changed from within. The harsh treatment continues, but she endures it differently now. She carries promises. Her son will be great. His descendants will multiply beyond counting. The present suffering holds eternal significance. When labor arrives, she delivers the child just as prophesied. Abraham names him Ishmael. God hears. The old patriarch is 86 years old when his firstborn son draws his first breath. After decades of waiting, he finally holds a child of his own flesh and blood. The birth brings joy tangled up with complexity. Abraham loves this boy with fierce devotion. Ishmael grows strong and quick under his father's proud gaze. For 13 years, he is Abraham's only son, the apparent heir to all the promises. But divine purposes often advance along multiple paths at once. Ishmael's birth fulfills one part of God's word to Abraham, a son from his own body. Yet it is not the complete fulfillment. Sarah still waits for her promised child. The covenant has more chapters yet to be written. During these 13 years, God remains silent. No visions come, no promises are renewed. Abraham raises Ishmael, grows older, and perhaps begins to wonder if this is how the covenant will eventually work itself out. The boy thrives, learns the ways of the desert, and shows every indication of becoming a worthy heir. Yet silence from heaven does not mean absence. God is working even when his voice cannot be heard. Plans are taking shape that will surprise every person involved. The stage is being prepared for promises not yet fulfilled. Hagar watches her son grow with pride and fierce protectiveness. She remembers the angel's words beside the desert spring. This child is marked by God, noticed by heaven, and set apart for greatness. Whatever complexities lie ahead, Ishmael has divine backing. The well Bir Lahai Roy stands as testimony to God's character. He sees the desperate, he hears the afflicted. He notices those whom society considers expendable. Even when human plans create complications, divine love finds a way to bless those caught in the aftermath. 13 years of relative peace settle over Abraham's household. A father delights in his son. A mother guards her child's interests. The promised heir grows strong beneath desert skies. But change is drawing near, like distant thunder on the horizon. The covenant still has surprises in store. Covenant of circumcision. 13 years of silence come to an end with divine footsteps. Abraham, now 99 years old, encounters the voice that has shaped his entire adult life. Time has carved deep lines into his face. His beard shows silver white in the morning light. Yet when God speaks, those ancient promises stir fresh hope in aging bones. I am God Almighty, the Lord declares, using a name that speaks of unlimited power. Walk before me and be blameless. The command carries both invitation and requirement. Divine relationship demands integrity, wholeness, and complete devotion. What follows transforms everything. Abraham thought he understood about his identity and his calling. I will make my covenant between me and you, and will multiply you greatly. The promise reaches beyond anything previously disclosed. This is not simply about descendants. It is about nations, kings, and eternal purposes. Then comes the moment that cleaves history in two. No longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, for I have made you the father of a multitude of nations. The name change carries profound meaning. Abram means exalted father. Abraham means father of many nations. Identity shifts to align with destiny. The covenant establishes itself as everlasting. I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offspring after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and to your offspring after you. This transcends temporary agreements. This is permanent, eternal, and unbreakable. Land comes with the covenant. I will give to you and to your offspring after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. The promise includes specific geography, particular territory, marked by divine intention. But covenant demands response. God requires a sign, a mark that will identify his people throughout all of history. This is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and your offspring after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. The requirement extends beyond Abraham himself. You shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. He who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised, every male throughout your generations, whether born in your house or purchased with your silver, from any foreigner who is not of your offspring. Both he who is born in your house and he who is purchased with your silver shall surely be circumcised. The command carries consequences. Any uncircumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. Participation requires commitment. Half-hearted obedience has no place in divine relationship. Sarai receives her own transformation. As for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. Like her husband, her identity changes to match her destiny. Sarah means princess, a fitting name for one who will mother nations. The promise focuses on Sarah in ways that must have startled Abraham. I will bless her, and moreover I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she shall become nations. Kings of peoples shall come from her. After decades of barrenness, divine intervention will make her fruitful. Abraham's response lays bare his human heart. He falls on his face in worship, but questions rise within his mind. Shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? Shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? The physical impossibility staggers even the most faith-trained imagination. His thoughts turn toward Ishmael, the son he has loved for 13 years. Oh, that Ishmael might live before you! The cry rises from paternal affection. This boy has been his joy, his hope, his apparent heir. Surely God's plans must include him. Divine response comes with both comfort and clarification. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and multiply him greatly. He shall father 12 princes, and I will make him into a great nation. Ishmael's future is secure. God's blessing reaches out to him as well, but the covenant line flows through Sarah's child. But I will establish my covenant with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this time next year. The name means laughter, fitting for a child whose birth will bring joy after decades of waiting. The precision is astonishing. Not just sometime, not just eventually, but at this time next year. Divine precision sets human hope on a firm foundation. The impossible has a divine timetable. Abraham responds with immediate obedience. That very same day he takes every male in his household himself, Ishmael's servants and slaves, and circumcises them all according to God's command. No delay, no hesitation. When God speaks, action follows. The physical pain must have been considerable. 99-year-old flesh does not mend quickly, yet Abraham bears it without complaint. This mark in his body represents an eternal covenant. The temporary discomfort fades beside its everlasting significance. Ishmael, now 13, receives the mark alongside his father. The boy participates in the covenant, even though he is not its primary heir. God's grace extends beyond the main line of promise. Even those on the edges of divine purpose receive divine attention. The household transformation is complete. New names reflect new identities. Fresh promises revive aging hearts. Physical marks bear witness to spiritual realities. Everything has changed. Yet everything builds on what came before. From this day forward, every male child born to Abraham's lineage will carry the covenant mark. 8 days after birth, each boy will be identified as belonging to God's chosen people. The practice will continue across millennia, binding generations to this moment of divine encounter. The silence has ended. God has spoken again. But now the waiting takes on a different character entirely. Next year, at this very season, Sarah will hold her promised son in her arms. The impossible is about to become inevitable. Visitors at Mamre. Heat shimmers across the plain near Hebron. Abraham sits in the shade of his tent during the hottest part of the day, the hour when wise desert dwellers rest until temperatures cool. His eyes sweep the horizon, a habit built up over decades of nomadic living. Movement in any direction can mean visitors, traders, or trouble. 3 figures appear in the distance, walking steadily toward his camp. Strangers in the wilderness always present both opportunity and risk. They might carry news from distant lands, goods for trade, or dangerous intentions. But Abraham's heart, shaped by years of divine encounters, senses something different about these approaching men. He rises quickly and runs to meet them. His aging body moves with surprising urgency. Something within him stirs, a recognition that goes beyond physical sight. These are no ordinary travelers. He bows deeply before them, showing the highest respect. "My lord," he says, addressing what appears to be their leader, "if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree." The invitation flows from ancient hospitality customs, but it carries unusual intensity. His offer expands with generous enthusiasm. "Let me bring a morsel of bread, that you may refresh yourselves, and after that you may pass on, since you have come to your servant." The humble language masks the elaborate preparations that are about to unfold. The visitors accept his invitation with simple grace. "Do as you have said." Their agreement unleashes a rush of activity throughout Abraham's household. Abraham hurries to Sarah's tent. "Quick, 3 measures of fine flour, knead it and make cakes." 3 measures equals roughly 20 quarts of flour, enough to feed a small army, not merely 3 travelers. Nothing about this meal will be ordinary. He runs to his herd and selects a calf, tender and choice, the finest meat available for these mysterious guests. He hands it to a young man who sets about preparing it with skilled hands. The scent of roasting meat soon fills the air around the encampment. Meanwhile, Abraham gathers curds and milk to accompany the feast. Every detail receives careful thought. These visitors will receive the finest hospitality his household can offer. He serves them personally, standing nearby as they eat beneath the shade of the trees. As the meal continues, one visitor poses a question that reshapes everything. "Where is Sarah, your wife?" The inquiry sounds innocent enough, but carries deep implications. How does this stranger know Sarah's name? How does he know that Abraham has a wife at all? "She is in the tent," Abraham replies, his awareness sharpening. This is clearly no ordinary encounter. What follows shatters the limits of human possibility. "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, shall have a son." The promise lands like thunder, splitting a clear sky. Sarah, now 89 years old, long past any natural hope of becoming a mother, will carry a child. Sarah listens from inside the tent, pressing close to the fabric. She hears every word of this extraordinary announcement. Her response is instant and involuntary. She laughs, not the laughter of joy, but the dry amusement of impossibility. Her body knows its limitations all too well. Her womb has been barren for decades. The promise sounds absurd. The visitor's response reveals his true identity. Why did Sarah laugh and say, "Shall I indeed give birth now that I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time I will return to you, about this time next year, and Sarah shall have a son." The Lord himself sits beneath Abraham's trees. The Creator of the universe has accepted Abraham's hospitality. Divine presence fills this ordinary moment with extraordinary meaning. No wonder Abraham sensed something extraordinary about these visitors. Fear takes hold of Sarah when she grasps the full weight of what just happened. She denies her laughter, saying, "I did not laugh." The denial springs from terror rather than deliberate deception. To laugh at God's promise feels like something close to blasphemy, especially when that laughter rose from decades of disappointment. But the Lord's response carries gentle firmness rather than condemnation. "No, but you did laugh." The acknowledgement is not an accusation, it is understanding. God knows the human heart. He comprehends the bitter grief behind Sarah's laughter. The laughter of disbelief will one day become laughter of joy when Isaac arrives. Even skeptical hearts can receive divine grace. The meal continues with undercurrents of recognition flowing between host and guests. Abraham serves the Creator of heaven and earth with bread and meat. The common elements of hospitality become something sacred when divine presence touches them. As the visitors prepare to depart, they carry Abraham's future with them. The promise has been spoken. The time has been fixed. About this time next year echoes in the air like a distant bell. The impossible pregnancy will begin soon. Sarah retreats deeper into her tent, her mind turning over possibilities she had buried long ago. Could it truly happen? Could her aged body carry life? Could decades of barrenness end now? The questions offer no comfortable answers. Abraham watches his guests depart with layered emotions. Joy at the promise mingles with the awareness of all its implications. A child at 100 years old will bring both blessing and challenge. Nothing about this divine intervention will be simple. The encounter marks everything it touches. The trees that provided shade become witnesses to a divine visitation. The ground where bread was broken becomes sacred earth. Ordinary hospitality has hosted extraordinary grace. Time now moves toward fulfillment. The promise carries its own momentum. Sarah's laughter of disbelief will one day give way to laughter of delight. The God who visits humble tents keeps every promise he makes beneath their shade. 9 months stretch ahead, 9 months for faith to overtake doubt, for possibility to become reality, for divine power to demonstrate once more that nothing is too hard for the Lord. Bargaining for Sodom. The 3 visitors rise from their meal beneath Abraham's trees. 2 of them turn toward Sodom, but the 3rd remains with Abraham. Divine conversation continues as evening approaches. What unfolds next reveals the heart of God and the breathtaking boldness of friendship with the Almighty. "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do?" The Lord muses, speaking as much to himself as to his faithful servant. The question reveals stunning intimacy. God chooses to share his plans with this desert wanderer rather than act in secrecy. The reasoning behind this transparency cuts straight to the heart of divine character. Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I have chosen him, that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice. Divine friendship arrives with divine responsibility. Abraham's calling extends beyond personal blessing to worldwide influence. The nations will find blessing through his lineage, but that blessing carries the weight of righteousness and justice. Character matters deeply in covenant relationships. Then comes the revelation that stops Abraham's heart cold. Because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and their sin is very grave, I will go down to see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry that has come to me. And if not, I will know. The words carry the full weight of judicial authority. Divine investigation comes before divine judgment. Even God, who knows all things, follows patterns of justice that satisfy both mercy and righteousness. The city's wickedness has drawn heaven's attention, but verification will come through direct examination. The 2 angels depart for Sodom, leaving Abraham standing alone with the Lord. What happens next demonstrates courage that borders on breathtaking boldness. Abraham knows that Lot lives in Sodom with his family. His nephew's life hangs in the balance of divine judgment. Love compels him to speak, "Will you indeed sweep away the righteous together with the wicked?" The question challenges divine justice while fully honoring divine authority. Abraham approaches the throne of judgment with reverent audacity. His argument gains force as it builds. Suppose there are 50 righteous people within the city. Will you then sweep away the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to put the righteous to death with the wicked, so that the righteous fare as the wicked. Far be that from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just? The logic holds firmly. Divine justice demands protection for the innocent. If righteous people live in Sodom, surely they deserve to be preserved. Abraham appeals to God's own character as the foundation for his request. The Lord's response reveals divine grace without reservation. If I find at Sodom 50 righteous people within the city, I will spare the whole place for their sake. An entire city can be preserved for the sake of 50 good people. Mercy rises above judgment when righteousness intercedes, but Abraham's heart knows Sodom's condition. 50 righteous people may be too many to hope for. So he presses further, approaching the divine throne with increasing boldness. "Behold, I have undertaken to speak to the Lord, I who am but dust and ashes. Suppose 5 of the 50 righteous are lacking. Will you destroy the whole city for lack of 5? The humble language barely conceals audacious faith. Abraham acknowledges his lowly standing while exercising remarkable authority in divine conversation. Dust and ashes dare to negotiate with the Creator of the universe. Again, the Lord agrees. I will not destroy it if I find 45 there. Divine patience matches human persistence. Each request receives gracious consideration. Abraham continues his careful descent down the numerical ladder. Suppose 40 are found there. The answer comes without any hesitation. For the sake of 40, I will not do it. Divine mercy keeps pace with human intercession. The negotiation continues with gathering intensity. Suppose 30 are found there. The response remains steady. I will not do it if I find 30 there. God's readiness to preserve the city holds firm with each new number. Abraham's requests grow more daring as divine patience proves itself limitless. Suppose 20 are found there. The answer echoes all the ones before it. For the sake of 20, I will not destroy it. Even a small remnant of righteousness can hold an entire city together. Finally, Abraham arrives at what feels like the absolute limit of both divine and human patience. Oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak just this once more. Suppose 10 are found there. The number seems impossibly small for a great city, yet still Abraham dares to voice it. The Lord's final answer discloses the depths of divine mercy. For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it. 10 righteous people, barely enough to form a single extended family, could preserve thousands of lives. Divine justice bends toward mercy whenever it is given any opening at all. The conversation draws to a close with mutual understanding. Abraham has pushed as far as he dares. The Lord has shown mercy that exceeds human expectation. Divine judgment will move forward, but only after every possibility for preservation has been thoroughly explored. The Lord departs, leaving Abraham to sit with what has just taken place. He has stood in the presence of divine justice and found it tempered by infinite mercy. The God who judges nations listens to human intercession. The Creator of heaven and earth gives careful consideration to the appeals of dust and ashes. But deeper questions remain with Abraham in the gathering night. Will even 10 righteous people be found in Sodom? Can his nephew Lot and his family provide the righteousness needed for the city's survival? The morning will bring answers, but tonight brings only prayer and hope. The encounter has revealed profound truths about divine character. God desires to save rather than destroy. Divine judgment serves righteousness, not revenge. Even the most corrupt cities can be spared if sufficient righteousness dwells within their walls. Abraham returns to his tent a changed man. He has discovered that friendship with God carries with it the privilege of intercession. Human prayer can shape divine action. Righteous boldness finds a welcome place at heaven's throne. The night stretches long as Abraham wrestles with implications he cannot fully grasp. Somewhere in the distance, Sodom sleeps, entirely unaware that its fate is being weighed by divine investigation. Morning approaches, carrying the full weight of eternal consequences. Destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Evening settles over Sodom as two figures approach the city gates. To any casual observer, they appear to be ordinary travelers looking for shelter through the night. But these are the same divine messengers who shared bread with Abraham. They carry heaven's mission of investigation and, if necessary, judgment. Lot sits at the city gate as darkness falls. This position marks him as a man of some standing in Sodom. The gate is where business is conducted and where justice is administered. When he spots the strangers, something within him immediately recognizes their need for protection. Rising quickly, he bows before them with deep respect. "My lords, please turn aside to your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you may rise up early and go on your way." His urgency carries undertones of desperation. He knows exactly what happens to vulnerable travelers in Sodom once night has fallen. The visitors initially decline his offer. "No, we will spend the night in the town square." Their refusal tests both Lot's persistence and the city's character. What befalls strangers who sleep in Sodom's open streets will reveal the city's true nature without any need for further investigation. Lot's insistence becomes more urgent. He presses them strongly until they finally agree to come to his house. His relief is unmistakable. These men will be safe under his roof, sheltered by the ancient laws of hospitality that still hold meaning for him. He prepares a meal for them, baking unleavened bread and serving a full spread. The modest fare contrasts sharply with Abraham's elaborate preparations, but carries the same spirit of generous welcome. Lot's household shows the last remaining flicker of righteousness in a city that has grown entirely dark. But before his visitors can settle in for the night, disaster strikes. The men of Sodom, both young and old, surround Lot's house from every side. Their intentions are clear and deeply disturbing. They call out to Lot with demands that expose the full depth of their depravity. "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, that we may know them." The phrasing barely conceals their violent purpose. These are not casual requests, but aggressive demands from a crowd intoxicated by its own wickedness. Lot steps outside, pulling the door shut behind him to shield his guests. What he does next reveals both admirable loyalty and a tragic confusion of values. He pleads with the crowd, calling them brothers, in a desperate attempt to reach whatever humanity might still flicker inside them. "I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly." His words fall on ears made deaf by years of unchecked sin. The crowd's response grows louder and more threatening. They accuse him of setting himself above them as a self-appointed moral judge. "This fellow came to sojourn, and he has become the judge," they shout. "Now we will deal worse with you than with them." The mob turns against Lot himself, pressing forward to break down his door and take both him and his guests by force. The angels act without delay to rescue their host. They pull Lot back inside and strike every man outside the door with blindness. The attackers grope helplessly in the sudden dark, unable to locate the door they had been so determined to smash through. Divine mercy steps in to protect the righteous while revealing heaven's authority over wickedness. The true nature of the angel visitors now becomes unmistakably clear to Lot. These are no ordinary travelers, but chosen messengers of the Most High God. Every word they speak carries the full authority of divine judgment. Do you have anyone else here, sons-in-law, sons, daughters, or anyone you have in the city? Bring them out of this place, for we are about to bring destruction upon it, because the cry against its people has risen greatly before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us here to carry out that destruction." Terror seizes Lot's heart. The judgment that Abraham had negotiated to prevent is now beyond stopping. Sodom's wickedness has reached its full and final measure. Not even 10 righteous souls can be found within its walls. Divine patience has finally reached its end. Lot rushes out urgently to warn his sons-in-law, and the young men pledge to marry his daughters. "Rise up, get yourselves out of this place, for the Lord is about to bring destruction upon the city." But his warning sounds like nonsense to them. They have lived in Sodom so long that the very concept of divine judgment feels laughable and impossible. Their mocking laughter seals their destruction. Dawn begins to break over the condemned city as the angels press for greater urgency. "Rise up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of this place. Time is nearly gone." Divine judgment will wait only long enough for the righteous to make their escape. But Lot hesitates. Years of building a life in Sodom have grown roots that are terribly hard to pull free. His belongings, his standing in the community, the familiarity of his surroundings all tug at his heart. The angels must physically take hold of him, his wife, and his 2 daughters by their hands and pull them out of the city. The scripture notes that the Lord was merciful to him in doing this. Even Lot's faltering faith receives divine protection. God's mercy reaches even the spiritually disoriented when their hearts still hold some remnant of righteousness. Once outside the city walls, one of the angels delivers final instructions. "Run for your life. Do not look behind you and do not stop anywhere in the valley. Flee to the hills, or you will be swept away." The instruction is urgent and clear. Safety can only be found in total and complete separation from the condemned cities. Lot requests permission to flee to a small nearby city called Zor, rather than the distant hills. The angel grants this request, but presses the urgency further. "Hurry, escape there, for I cannot do anything until you arrive safely." The sun climbs fully above the horizon, just as Lot reaches the shelter of Zor. Then divine judgment falls with sudden and terrible force. The Lord rained down on Sodom and Gomorrah, burning sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven. The description points to both natural catastrophe and supernatural judgment fused together into one act of perfect divine wrath. The destruction is thorough and devastating beyond imagining. He overthrew those cities, the entire valley, all the inhabitants of those cities, and everything growing on the ground. Nothing survives the weight of divine fury. The fertile plain is reduced to a smoking wasteland in a matter of moments. Lot's wife, despite the clear and direct warning she received from the angel, turns her eyes back toward the city she is leaving behind. Perhaps she thinks of the possessions left behind in haste, or the friends who chose to remain, or perhaps she simply cannot resist one final look at the life she is losing. That backward glance becomes her final act. She is turned into a pillar of salt, a lasting monument to the peril of clinging to things that have been condemned. Abraham rises early that same morning and walks out to the place where he had stood before the Lord, looking out toward Sodom. Where fertile cities once dotted the wide plain, nothing but smoke now rises, curling upward like the smoke from a great furnace. His intercession could not spare the cities themselves, but it succeeded in rescuing his nephew. Divine mercy had preserved the righteous, even as judgment consumed the wicked. The contrast between the 2 men becomes unmistakable in the aftermath of the destruction. Abraham had remained separate from the corruption of the world around him and kept his relationship with God intact. Lot had chosen to dwell among the wicked and barely escaped being destroyed alongside them. Both men faced the same divine judgment, yet their different choices led to vastly different outcomes. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah rings through all of history as a warning about divine justice. God's patience has its limits. Wickedness that goes unchecked and unrepented will eventually face divine reckoning. Yet even in the midst of judgment, mercy finds a way to preserve those who hold some measure of righteousness. Lot survives to continue his difficult and troubled story, though he is permanently altered by what has happened. The man who once chose the richest portion of land for himself now lives as a wandering refugee. His possessions have vanished, his wife is gone, his place in society no longer exists. Yet he retains what truly matters most. His life and his daughters are spared. Divine mercy has held on to what is of genuine worth. The smoking ruins become a permanent reminder that the choices human beings make carry consequences that reach into eternity. The cities that appeared so prosperous, so established, so permanent, were gone in a single morning. Only those who held some connection to righteousness found a way of escape from the consuming fire. Abraham and Abimelech. The smoking ruins of Sodom gradually fade behind Abraham as he moves his entire household south toward the Negev. The destruction has shaken something deep within him. Divine judgment, even when it is fully deserved, leaves its mark on the hearts of those who witness it. He seeks distance from the devastation, needing space and time to process everything he has seen. His journey brings him to the region between Kadesh and Shur, into the land of the Philistines. Here he comes face to face with Abimelech, king of Gerar, a man who will teach him unexpected lessons about integrity and the far-reaching nature of divine protection. But first, Abraham repeats a pattern that should have been left behind in the ashes of Sodom. Fear takes hold of his heart as he surveys this unfamiliar land and the people who inhabit it. Old habits are stubborn things, even in men who walk closely with God. The same deception that brought disaster in Egypt now rises again in Philistine territory. "She is my sister," Abraham tells those who inquire about Sarah. The half-truth carries the same destructive potential as before. Sarah is indeed his half-sister, but she is above all else his wife. The deception is designed to protect his own life, but it places her honor and their covenant marriage in serious danger. What follows reveals how deeply human weakness can complicate divine purposes. Abimelech, struck by Sarah's beauty despite her advanced years, brings her into his royal household. The woman through whom Isaac is promised to be born within the very year now finds herself in a pagan king's court. The entire covenant hangs in the balance of human foolishness. But God moves with swift and unmistakable action. He comes to Abimelech in a dream of the night, speaking words that stop the king cold. "Behold, you are as good as a dead man because of the woman you have taken, for she belongs to another man as his wife." The divine warning is immediate and absolute. Death awaits anyone who interferes with God's covenant purposes, even when that interference is unintentional. Sarah's protection comes directly from heaven, ensuring that Isaac's birth will proceed exactly according to the divine plan. Abimelech's response reveals a surprising depth of integrity. "Lord, would you destroy an innocent people? Did he not himself say to me, 'She is my sister'? And did she not herself say the same, 'He is my brother'? I have done this in the uprightness of my heart and with clean hands." The pagan king's defense reflects more moral clarity than Abraham's deception did. Abimelech acted in complete good faith, based on information that turned out to be false. His moral confusion is the product of a lie told to him from outside, not corruption lurking within him. The contrast with Abraham's duplicity is sharp and deeply uncomfortable. God acknowledges the king's innocence while pressing the urgency of making it right. "Yes, I know that you have done this in the integrity of your heart, and it was I who kept you from sinning against me. That is why I did not let you touch her." Divine sovereignty has protected both Sarah's purity and Abimelech's soul at the same time. God's power works even through human deception to preserve his larger purposes. The king's uprightness is recognized and protected by God himself. The divine instruction then comes with clear and specific expectations. "Now return this man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray on your behalf, and you will live." But if you do not return her, understand that you will certainly die, you and everyone who belongs to you." The word prophet comes as a surprising act of generosity toward Abraham. Despite the lie he told, he has not lost his calling or his spiritual authority. Divine grace covers human failure without pretending it did not happen. The man who deceived others still carries the power to intercede for others before God. Abimelech rises early the following morning, shaken to his core by what he experienced in the night. He gathers all his servants and recounts everything that has happened to him. Fear settles over the entire household as they understand just how close they came to divine judgment. The king then summons Abraham and confronts him with words that carry fully justified reproach. "What have you done to us? How have I wronged you that you have brought this great guilt upon me and my kingdom? You have done things to me that simply should not be done." The accusation lands hard because every word of it is true. Abraham's deception placed innocent people in serious danger. His effort to protect himself put others at risk of divine judgment. The behavior one might expect from pagans was exhibited instead by God's own chosen servant. Abimelech presses further, demanding an explanation. "What possessed you to do this thing?" The question lays bare the weakness of Abraham's reasoning. What actual threat required such a deception? What genuine danger made duplicity necessary? Abraham's answer exposes both the depth of his fear and the poverty of his trust in God. "I said to myself that there is surely no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife." He had assumed the worst about these people, without a shred of evidence, projecting his own moral weakness outward onto those around him. His justification then continues, with a technical truth used to mask deeper dishonesty. "Besides, she truly is my sister, the daughter of my father, though not of my mother, and she became my wife." The partial truth functioned as complete deception, carefully shaping facts to avoid consequences. Most revealing of all is Abraham's confession that this was not an isolated incident, but a recurring pattern. "When God caused me to wander from my father's household, I said to her, 'This is the loyalty you must show me. At every place we go, say of me that he is my brother.'" The admission is staggering in its implications. Abraham has been operating this deception for decades, drawing his own wife into a life of ongoing dishonesty. The man called to bring blessing to the nations has instead been deceiving them. Yet Abimelech's response demonstrates a quality of grace that shames Abraham's gracelessness. The king not only returns Sarah completely unharmed, but heaps Abraham with generous gifts. "Behold, my land is open before you. Live wherever you choose." The man who was wronged extends warm and lavish hospitality to the one who wronged him. To Sarah, Abimelech gives 1,000 pieces of silver, declaring, "This is to cover the offense against you in the eyes of everyone who is with you. You are completely cleared." The gift makes a public declaration of her innocence and fully restores her dignity before all who knew what had happened. The pagan king demonstrates more genuine concern for her reputation than her own husband had. Abraham, despite his deception, steps into his prophetic role and fulfills it. He prays on Abimelech's behalf, and God heals the king, along with his wife and his female servants, so that they are able to have children again. Divine judgment withdraws when righteousness is restored. The intercessor's prayer proves fully effective, despite the moral failure that preceded it. The entire episode holds up uncomfortable truths about faith and character for honest examination. God's chosen servants remain entirely capable of serious moral failure. Divine purposes can survive human weakness, but they advance in spite of it rather than because of it. Those outside the covenant sometimes demonstrate more integrity than those within it, yet grace reaches all. Abraham's deception does not disqualify him from covenant blessing. Abimelech's integrity receives divine recognition and protection. Sarah's honor is preserved in spite of her husband's cowardice. God's purposes press forward, even through human foolishness. The encounter leaves Abraham humbled but not abandoned. He has witnessed divine patience extended toward his weakness and found genuine moral strength in an unexpected place. The promised son will arrive precisely on schedule, but the lesson about integrity will continue to echo through every chapter of his remaining story. Isaac is born. The promise floats in the air like morning mist hanging over the desert. At this time next year, Sarah, your wife, shall have a son. Divine words spoken beneath the great oaks at Mamre now move toward their fulfillment. Time flows purposefully toward miracle. Sarah's body gives no indication that the impossible promise is coming true. At 90 years of age, her womb has been barren for decades upon decades. The monthly rhythms of fertility ceased long ago, yet something stirs within her that defies every natural explanation. Divine power begins its quiet work precisely where human possibility has reached its end. Abraham watches his wife with new eyes. The woman who laughed at the angel's announcement now carries the seed of promise within her aging frame. Each passing day brings fresh wonder. Each morning reveals God's faithful power moving quietly within ordinary flesh. The pregnancy unfolds with all the normal discomforts of childbearing made considerably more intense by advanced age. Sarah's body pushes back against this unexpected burden. Her joints protest. Her strength ebbs and flows. Yet joy weaves itself through every physical difficulty. The impossible is becoming undeniably, visibly real. Word travels through the camp as Sarah's condition becomes apparent to all. Servants whisper to one another in amazement. Neighboring nomads hear the report with wide-eyed wonder. A 90-year-old woman carrying a child staggers the imagination of everyone who hears it. Only divine intervention can account for such a thing. Sarah herself marvels continually at what God has done within her body. The barren womb that brought her decades of shame and grief now swells with the life of promise. The empty arms that ached for a child prepare to hold the child of the covenant. The laughter of disbelief that escaped her lips before the angels is slowly transforming into laughter of approaching and overwhelming joy. Abraham, now 100 years old, prepares for fatherhood with trembling hands and an overflowing heart. 25 years have passed since the first promise was spoken. He has endured years of Sarah's barrenness, attempted to fulfill the promise through Hagar's fertility, and watched Ishmael grow into a young man. Now, the covenant child is nearly here. The labor arrives with an intensity that tests every measure of Sarah's aged strength, but the same divine power that initiated this pregnancy sustains it all the way through to its completion. The child who seemed impossible to conceive proves equally determined to enter the world. Promise takes on flesh in Sarah's exhausted and trembling arms. The Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah as he had promised. Those simple words carry extraordinary weight. Divine faithfulness has triumphed over human impossibility. God's word has proven more reliable than every natural limitation. Isaac draws his first breath in a world that has been waiting for his arrival. His cry announces that the impossible has actually happened. The child of promise, the heir of the covenant, the beginning of countless generations, has finally come into the world. Abraham holds his son with hands that shake with deep emotion. This tiny life represents the fullness of everything God has promised. Through this child, blessing will flow to all nations. In these small fingers rests the entire future of divine purpose. The weight of promise settles into Abraham's aging arms. Sarah's laughter fills the tent with pure and unbounded joy. God has brought laughter for me, she declares. Everyone who hears of this will laugh with me. The bitter laughter of disbelief has become the sweet and golden laughter of fulfillment. Divine grace has transformed her skepticism into celebration. Her wonder continues pouring out in words of praise. Who would have ever said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet here I am, having borne him a son in his old age. The sheer impossibility of it all continues to amaze even the one who experienced it firsthand. Miracles remain miraculous even to those who receive them. On the 8th day, Abraham circumcises Isaac in faithful obedience to the divine command. The covenant sign marks this child as belonging to God and to his chosen people. His flesh bears the symbol of promises that reach far beyond his individual life into the destiny of an entire nation. The camp celebrates with joy unlike anything before it. Food is prepared in abundance, stories are shared, songs of praise ring out. Isaac's birth is vindication for Sarah, fulfillment for Abraham, and a beacon of hope for all who place their trust in divine promises. The impossible has not merely happened, it has become the inevitable. Yet complexity finds its way into the celebration. Ishmael, now around 15 years old, watches his father's happiness with emotions that are difficult to untangle. For 13 years he was the only son, the apparent heir, the singular focus of Abraham's fatherly love. Now a baby commands the attention that once belonged exclusively to him. Sarah observes Ishmael's attitude and sees in it a genuine threat to her son's future. The older son's continued presence complicates the younger son's inheritance and position. But these concerns still lie ahead. Today belongs entirely to celebration. Today marks the triumph of faith over every form of impossibility. Today proves that divine promises find their fulfillment in spite of every human limitation. Isaac grows strong and healthy under his parents' devoted and delighted care. Every milestone brings fresh astonishment. His first smile, his first word, his first unsteady steps all carry the accumulated weight of answered prayer. This child embodies hope in human form. Abraham watches his son with eyes that have seen divine faithfulness demonstrated time and again. From the original call in Ur to this moment in the tent, God has remained completely true to every promise he ever made. Isaac's very existence testifies to divine reliability in a world of constant uncertainty. The name Isaac means laughter, and laughter truly does fill every corner of the household. Sarah's joy overflows in constant and unrestrained delight. Abraham's happiness shows in his gentle, protective care. Even the servants smile more freely now that the master's deepest and longest-held desire has finally been fulfilled. Years of waiting have ended in moments of pure joy. Decades of barrenness have given way to fertility beyond all imagining. The promise that seemed impossible has revealed itself to have always been inevitable. God's word has overcome every obstacle placed before it. Isaac's birth marks a turning point in the entire covenant story. The child of promise has arrived. The heir of blessing has been born. The future of divine purpose now sleeps peacefully in Sarah's arms, breathing softly the breath of miracle. Hagar and Ishmael sent away. Celebration fills Abraham's camp as Isaac reaches the age of weaning. This milestone marks a child's passage from infancy into childhood, from total dependence to the beginning of growing independence. In the ancient world, the weaning feast represents a child's successful survival past the most dangerous years of early life. Abraham prepares a great and generous feast to honor the occasion. Servants prepare elaborate dishes. Neighbors gather to share in the joy. Music and laughter move through the camp like cool water flowing through desert channels. Isaac has not merely survived these years, he has flourished under his parents' devoted attention. But in the middle of the celebration, Sarah's eyes catch something that chills her heart. Ishmael, now about 17 years old, is playing with little Isaac in a way that troubles her deeply. The text describes him simply as laughing or playing, but Sarah sees something more threatening in what he is doing. Perhaps Ishmael mocks the smaller child. Perhaps his play is too rough for a toddler. Perhaps he simply acts as the teenager he is, not realizing that his games could cause harm. Whatever the precise nature of his behavior, Sarah perceives it as a real danger to her son. Her response is immediate and absolute. She goes directly to Abraham with a demand that cuts through the festive atmosphere like a blade. Drive out this slave woman and her son. The son of this slave woman is not going to share the inheritance with my son Isaac." The demand strikes Abraham like a physical blow. Sarah is asking him to send away Hagar, the servant who has been part of his household for many years, and Ishmael, the son he has loved and raised for 17 years. The request seems cruel beyond measure. Abraham's heart breaks at the thought. Ishmael is his firstborn son. This child brought him joy for 13 years before Isaac ever arrived. The boy has known no father other than Abraham, no home other than this camp. To send him away feels like ripping away part of his own soul. The situation lays bare the complicated dynamics of ancient family life. Sarah's demand carries practical weight from her point of view. Ishmael's continued presence complicates Isaac's future inheritance. As the older son, Ishmael might press legal claims that diminish what Isaac receives. Her maternal instincts drive her fiercely to protect her child's standing and future. But Abraham sees beyond legal complications to the personal bonds involved. Ishmael is his son. Regardless of his mother's status, the boy has done nothing that deserves exile. To send him out into the wilderness seems both unjust and deeply dangerous. The matter is very distressing to Abraham on account of his son. The original Hebrew underscores the depth of his emotional pain. This is not a minor household disagreement, but a crisis that threatens to shatter relationships he holds most dear. Divine guidance comes to Abraham in his darkest hour of decision. God speaks with words that hold both command and compassion. Do not be distressed about the boy or about your slave woman. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. The command shocks Abraham. God himself aligns with Sarah's position in this agonizing dispute. The divine perspective perceives necessities that human emotion cannot easily accept. Isaac must receive the covenant promises free from competition and confusion. But God's command arrives wrapped in gracious assurance. "I will also make a nation out of the son of the slave woman, because he is your offspring too. Ishmael will not be lost in the wilderness. Divine blessing will follow him wherever he goes. His future, though different from Isaac's, remains bright with genuine promise." The divine word transforms an impossible choice into an act of obedience. Abraham rises early the following morning, his heart grieving, but his direction clear. He takes bread and a skin of water, provisions for the road ahead, and gives them to Hagar. He places the supplies on her shoulder and sends her away with Ishmael. The plain description contains depths of anguish that words can barely touch. A father is saying farewell to his son, perhaps for the last time. A master is dismissing a faithful servant into the unknown. Love and obedience collide in heartbreaking surrender. Hagar and Ishmael depart from the only home the boy has ever known. They wander into the wilderness of Beersheba, each step carrying them further from security and everything familiar. The water Abraham provided will not last long under the desert sun. When it runs out, despair overtakes Hagar completely. She places Ishmael under a bush to give him whatever shade it can offer. Then she walks away a bowshot's distance and sits down alone. She cannot bring herself to watch her son die of thirst. "Let me not look on the death of the child," she says through bitter, inconsolable tears. The cry of a mother's heart echoes across the empty wilderness. All her hopes, all her dreams, all the love she carries for this boy seem about to end in tragedy. But God hears the boy's voice. Divine attention focuses on the suffering child rather than the weeping mother. God heard the voice of the boy. The text emphasizes that heaven notices the young, the vulnerable, the innocent, those caught in circumstances far beyond their own making or control. The angel of God calls to Hagar from heaven with words of both comfort and instruction. "What is the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid, because God has heard the boy's voice from where he lies. Get up, lift the boy, and hold him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation." Divine intervention transforms despair into hope in a single moment. The child who appeared destined to die will live to become the father of a great people. The boy whom Sarah sent away carries divine promise in his very bloodline. God's blessing extends beyond the boundaries of the covenant family to embrace all of Abraham's offspring. Then God opens Hagar's eyes, and she sees a well of water close by. The provision was already there, hidden from the sight of despair. She fills the skin and gives her son a drink. Life flows back in where death had been pressing close. Hope displaces despair. God stays with Ishmael as he grows up in the wilderness. He develops into a skilled archer, proficient in desert survival. His mother finds him a wife from her homeland of Egypt. The family that began in Abraham's tent writes its own story in the open wilderness. Ishmael settles in the wilderness of Paran, far from his father's camp, but never beyond the reach of divine care. He fathers 12 sons who become princes over their own tribes. The promise made to Abraham is fulfilled. Ishmael becomes a great nation. The painful separation serves divine purposes that human hearts cannot easily come to terms with. Isaac's inheritance is secured. Ishmael's future is established. Both sons receive blessing, though in different forms and in different places. Abraham's camp grows quieter after their departure. The tent that once echoed with 2 sons' voices hears now only Isaac's laughter. The patriarch carries the wound of separation within him, alongside the peace that comes from obedience to the divine will. The story reveals the complex and often painful interplay between human emotion and divine purpose. God's plans sometimes require choices that break the heart. His blessings often arrive through paths that seem counterintuitive. What appears in the moment to be rejection can actually be divine protection and provision in disguise. Both Sarah and Hagar, in their different and complicated ways, acted out of maternal love. Both sons receive divine blessing, though the channels through which that blessing flows are entirely different. The God who sees every heart provides for all his children, even when human families cannot hold them all together. Treaty at Beersheba. The desert wind carries whispers of change across the open landscape. Abraham stands at the edge of his camp, watching a dust cloud approach from the north. King Abimelech is returning, but not as an adversary this time. Peace travels alongside him. Years have passed since their previous encounter. The memory of Sarah, nearly lost through deception, still lingers between them. Yet something more powerful draws the Philistine king back to Abraham's tents. Perhaps it is the way prosperity seems to follow this Hebrew wanderer wherever he goes. Perhaps it is the quiet power that appears to surround him the way morning mist surrounds the hills. Abimelech brings his military commander Phicol and trusted advisors with him. Their manner of approach communicates respect, not threat or conquest. God is with you in all that you do, the king declares openly. These words carry significant weight in the ancient world. When a ruler acknowledges divine favor resting on another man, the conditions for a treaty become possible. Abraham receives them with the full customs of hospitality: water for dusty and weary feet, shade from the relentless sun, food to restore the strength of tired travelers. But beneath the courteous welcome lies careful and measured consideration. Trust must be built, even when a king speaks of God's blessing on your life. The negotiation centers on water. In this harsh and unforgiving land, a well is not merely property. It represents survival itself. Abraham's servants have worked hard, digging deep into the earth to coax precious water up through stone and sand. But men belonging to Abimelech have seized one of these wells by force. The theft cuts far deeper than the loss of property alone. It threatens the very foundation of nomadic existence. "Swear to me here before God," Abimelech requests. that you will not deal falsely with me or with my children or with my descendants. Deal with me and with the land where you have sojourned as loyally as I have dealt with you." The king's words carry within them a hint of concealed anxiety. This wandering patriarch somehow commands a respect that no army can compel or manufacture. Abraham agrees to the terms, but his agreement comes with conditions attached. The matter of the seized well must be openly acknowledged and formally recognized as his rightful property. Compensation flows in both directions in the diplomacy of the ancient world. The king accepts these conditions without argument. 7 ewe lambs are then separated from the larger flocks. Abraham presents them ceremonially to Abimelech. These animals serve as living witnesses, their formal presentation transforming a spoken agreement into a binding and sacred covenant. The king accepts them, understanding the full symbolic weight they carry. What is the meaning of these 7 ewe lambs you have set apart? Abimelech asks, though the ancient ritual calls for proper question and answer. "Accept these from my hand," Abraham replies, "as evidence that I dug this well." The exchange creates an obligation that will outlast both men. Future generations will recall this moment when disputes arise over water and land. They name the place Beersheba, the well of the oath. The name carries a double weight of meaning. 7 lambs bear witness to the covenant. An oath seals the agreement between the two parties. Language itself becomes a monument to peace. The treaty establishes much more than water rights. It creates a recognized sphere of mutual respect in otherwise hostile territory. Abraham secures safety for his growing household. Abimelech secures a measure of neutrality from a man whose God actively intervenes in the affairs of human beings. After the king departs, Abraham plants a tamarisk tree. The hardy and resilient shrub will outlive both men who formed this agreement. Its deep roots will drink from the very well over which they negotiated. Its spreading branches will provide shade for future generations who will tell the story of this day. Beneath those branches, Abraham calls on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. Prayer rises like morning incense into the open sky. The eternal nature of his God stands in stark contrast to the temporary nature of every human agreement. Kings die, treaties fade, but the Lord endures beyond the reach of time. The well at Beersheba becomes far more than a source of water. It represents Abraham's first recognized and legally secure foothold in the Promised Land. He no longer depends entirely on the hospitality of others or the fragile goodwill of temporary arrangements. He has established permanent presence through a recognized and witnessed covenant. Water rises up from the earth below, cold and clean and sweet. Flocks gather at its edge to drink. Children splash in the shallows near its rim. Life thrives around this negotiated peace. The well will water Isaac's flocks one day. Jacob will dream of a ladder reaching to heaven nearby. Generations will remember and recount the day their ancestor stood before a king and made a covenant of peace. Yet beneath all the celebration lies a deeper and more enduring truth. Abraham's real security rests not in human agreements or property rights, but in divine promise. Treaties may eventually fail. Wells may one day run dry. But God's covenant extends beyond the reach of every earthly power. The tamarisk tree grows slowly in the desert soil, putting down its roots deep in search of hidden water. Like Abraham's faith, it finds its nourishment in places that others cannot see or reach. The tree will stand long after the man who planted it has returned to the earth, a silent testimony to the day when peace was possible between a wandering shepherd and a settled king. The Testing of Abraham, the Akedah, Part 1. Silence stretches wide across the desert night. Stars move overhead in their ancient and unchanging patterns. Abraham lies awake, listening to the quiet rhythms of his sleeping camp. A settled peace has come over his household like a warm and heavy blanket. Isaac sleeps safely close by. Sarah rests without worry. All appears well in the world. Then God speaks. The voice comes not with thunder or the shaking of the ground, but with a terrible and quiet gentleness. Abraham, the patriarch, recognizes this voice immediately. It is the voice that called him out of Ur, that promised him descendants too numerous to count, that established covenants with him across the years. But tonight it carries a weight that makes his soul go still with dread. "Here I am," Abraham responds, as he always has. These words have marked every encounter between this man and his God. They signal readiness, surrender, availability, trust, but tonight they will lead him somewhere he cannot imagine. "Take your son," God continues, "your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the region of Moriah. Offer him there as a burnt offering on a mountain that I will show you." The words descend like heavy stones, dropping into still and quiet water. Waves of shock radiate outward through Abraham's entire consciousness. Sacrifice Isaac, the boy of promise, the child of laughter, the heir through whom all nations are to receive blessing. Abraham's mind flings itself against the command. Every part of him cries out in protest and disbelief. This boy is the embodiment of everything God has promised. Isaac carries the future of divine purpose in his living body. Through him, descendants will multiply, like the stars above and the sand below. How can this same God now call for his death? The patriarch is no stranger to the practices of the peoples around him. Child sacrifice darkens many altars across the land of Canaan. But Abraham's God has seemed profoundly different from those gods. His commands have consistently brought life rather than death. His promises have opened futures rather than sealed them. Yet now, this same God issues the unthinkable command. Sleep is no longer possible. Abraham rises and moves quietly among his resting flocks. The sounds of the night, the breathing of animals, the creaking of tent ropes in the breeze, the distant cry of a jackal, all feel suddenly strange and unfamiliar. The world has tilted on its axis. Nothing appears the same in this new and shattering reality. Questions press against his mind from every direction. Is this truly God's voice, or is something deceiving him? Has he misunderstood what was commanded? Could the word be meant in some way other than the literal? The silence returns no comfort, no clarification, no escape from what he heard. Abraham returns to the tent and stands looking down at Isaac's sleeping face. The boy has grown strong and tall. His laughter rings through the camp like music every day. His curious questions about life and faith and God have become one of his father's deepest joys. How can this child become a sacrifice on an altar? And yet beneath the horror, there is a deeper and more agonizing question. If God truly requires Isaac's death, then the promise itself is being unmade. No descendants through Isaac, no great nation, no blessing flowing out to all peoples everywhere. Everything collapses into ash and grief. Abraham has obeyed God's voice for decades without wavering. He left his homeland and all that was familiar at divine command. He trusted impossible promises about land and descendants when the evidence before his eyes said otherwise. He held on to faith when Sarah laughed at the prospect of childbearing. He has staked his entire existence on God's faithfulness. Now that same faithfulness appears to require the most unfaithful act he could imagine. God is asking Abraham to destroy the very thing he promised to establish. The test cuts to the very root of trust itself. Will Abraham continue to obey even when obedience appears to contradict everything he has ever believed or known? Dawn approaches with merciless inevitability. Servants will begin to stir. Isaac will wake with his usual bright and easy smile. Sarah will begin the familiar rhythms of her morning. Life will continue as if the world has not been shattered in the darkness. Abraham makes his choice in the grey and heavy hour before the sun arrives. He will obey, not because he understands why, not because the command makes any kind of sense to him, not because he feels willing or prepared for what lies ahead. He will obey because God has spoken, and that must be sufficient. Abraham wakes two of his young servants quietly so as not to disturb the rest of the camp. He does not wake Sarah or explain the purpose of the journey. Some paths must be walked alone, even when others walk alongside. He chooses wood for the offering, a knife for the sacrifice, and a container of fire to kindle the flame. Isaac stirs as the preparations near their end. "Father," he calls out with the sleepy confusion of a child just waking, "are we going somewhere?" Abraham's heart fractures quietly at the innocence of the question. "Yes, my son, we are going to worship." The words carry truth, though not the truth Isaac is expecting. They will indeed worship on that mountain, though the worship will demand everything. The boy rises eagerly, glad to have an unexpected journey before him. He helps load the donkey without any suspicion of what lies ahead. To Isaac, this is simply another adventure with his beloved father. He cannot conceive that he is helping prepare for his own death. Abraham saddles the animal with trembling hands. Every routine task feels loaded with finality. The familiar work of travel, securing loads, checking the water, thinking through the route, takes on a horrifying new weight. He is preparing to climb a mountain and offer his son. The small company sets out as the sun breaks above the eastern hills. Abraham leads the donkey. Isaac walks close beside him, talking easily about the journey and what might lie ahead. The servants follow at a distance, entirely unaware of their master's anguish. No one around him suspects they are walking toward the greatest test faith has ever been required to endure. The Testing of Abraham the Akedah, Part 2. The journey to Moriah stretches out like a lifetime, condensed into 3 days of walking. Every step carries Abraham deeper into the valley of ultimate decision. Every mile presses the weight down more heavily on his heart. Isaac walks alongside him, trusting and untroubled, while the knife wrapped and secured in the pack seems to burn through everything around it. On the first day, conversation moves along easily between them. Isaac asks about their destination. Abraham answers with vague references to worship and sacrifice. The boy receives these explanations without suspicion. Why would he have any reason to question his father's words? They have traveled together many times, always returning home safely. The second day passes in quieter stretches of walking. Abraham's responses become shorter and slower. His eyes scan the horizon with steady purpose, searching for the mountain God will point out. Each rising peak they pass might be the one. Each hilltop might be the altar. The uncertainty digs at his composure like a persistent wound that will not close. Isaac notices the change in his father's mood, but assumes it is nothing more than the weariness of the road. He tries to lift the atmosphere with stories and questions about the animals and flocks left behind at camp. His cheerful voice creates a kind of counterpoint to the turmoil rolling through his father's interior. Life and death walk side by side along the dusty and winding road. The servants remain completely unaware of what their master is carrying within him. From where they stand, they see only an elderly man taking his son to offer a sacrifice, an ordinary enough journey for a man of faith in these lands. They cannot hear the war that rages in silence inside Abraham's chest. They do not see the tears he sheds before dawn in the darkness when the others still sleep. The third morning breaks clear and bright. As they prepare to leave their camp, Abraham's gaze is drawn toward a particular mountain in the near distance. Something about its shape, its position, the particular way it stands, speaks directly to his spirit. This is the place God has shown him. This is where the altar will be built. "Stay here with the donkey," Abraham tells the two servants. His voice carries a quietness that closes all questions before they can form. "The boy and I are going up there to worship, and then we will come back to you." The words come out in a way that surprises even Abraham himself. We will come back. Does he truly believe that? Or is he simply saying what needs to be said to keep the servants from following? Deep within him, a small and fragile flame of hope still holds itself upright. Perhaps God will provide another way through this. Perhaps the test will end differently from the way it appears. Isaac takes the wood from the donkey and lifts it onto his own shoulders. He is strong enough now to bear the load that will fuel his own sacrifice. Abraham carries the fire and the knife. Father and son begin the final ascent alone together. The path winds upward through scattered stones and thorny desert brush. Each footfall brings them closer to the moment that will define both of them for as long as memory endures. Isaac breathes harder under the weight of the wood, but he does not complain. His trust in his father is complete and unquestioned. Somewhere in the middle of the climb, Isaac breaks the silence between them. "Father," the word carries genuine and innocent puzzlement. "Yes, my son." Abraham's voice trembles at the edge of breaking. "I see the fire and I see the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" The question goes through Abraham like a blade. This precious and trusting child still believes they are on their way to sacrifice an animal. He has no awareness that he is the intended offering. His faith in his father remains absolute, unshaken, and completely open. Abraham stops walking. He turns and looks fully into his son's questioning eyes. For a moment he cannot form any words at all. The truth waits on his lips, but he cannot bring himself to speak it. Instead, he finds something that is both honest and hopeful at the same time. "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." The answer is enough for Isaac. Of course God will provide. When has the Lord ever failed to do what he said? The boy adjusts the wood on his shoulders and resumes climbing. Abraham follows just behind him, struck by the weight of what his own words have revealed. Even standing at the edge of this darkest hour, he still believes God will make a way. They reach the summit as the sun approaches its high point in the sky. The place Abraham chooses feels ancient and set apart from ordinary time. Here, on this exposed and windswept height, earth and heaven seem to press close against each other. Here, the supreme test of faith will reach the moment of decision. Abraham begins building the altar with hands that are steady despite everything. Each stone is set with deliberate care. Each layer is checked for strength and balance. Isaac works beside him with willing hands, still not understanding what is coming. The boy's participation makes every moment heavier to bear. The altar is finished. Abraham arranges the wood across it with the practiced precision of a man who has made many offerings. This fire must burn clean and complete. If God asks for this sacrifice, it will be given fully and properly. Only then does Abraham turn to face his son. Isaac stands waiting beside the altar, patient and calm. The moment of revelation can no longer be deferred. Isaac. The boy looks up with clear and trusting eyes, ready for whatever comes next. He holds no fear, no suspicion, no inkling of what is about to be asked. Abraham's hands are unsteady as he reaches for the rope. His movements are careful and slow. Isaac does not fight or pull away, though confusion shows clearly in his face. Trust overrides fear. Love for his father overcomes resistance. The boy allows himself to be bound because his father is the one who binds him. Only when he lies still on the altar does understanding fully arrive. He is the lamb God is providing. The sacrifice that has been asked for is his own life. And yet even in that recognition, he does not struggle or cry out against it. His trust in his father runs deeper than even his fear of dying. Abraham raises the knife with hands that tremble under the weight of what they are doing. The blade catches the midday sun and throws it back in sharp flashes of light. This is the final and ultimate moment of testing. Everything turns on what happens next. Aftermath of the test. The angel's voice still rings across the mountaintop when Abraham's legs give way beneath him. The knife drops from his fingers and clatters away among the stones. Isaac lies bound on the altar, his eyes wide with shock and something that resembles awe. Father and son stare at one another across the immense space of emotion that has opened between them. Neither can yet fully take in what has just occurred between heaven and earth. "Do not lay a hand on the boy," the voice commanded. "Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham's hands shake as he works the ropes loose. Isaac sits up slowly, bringing feeling back into his wrists with careful circular movements. Neither of them speaks. Words feel entirely inadequate for what has just taken place between them. The silence settles heavy with all that remains unspoken. Then a rustling from within a nearby thicket breaks through the quiet. There, with its horns caught in the tangled branches, stands a ram. The animal struggles briefly before going still, as if recognizing and accepting its own appointed purpose. God has provided the lamb for the offering, exactly as Abraham told his son he would. Abraham helps Isaac down carefully from the altar. The boy's legs are unsteady, but his eyes hold no accusation toward his father. Trust has survived the test, though it has been irrevocably deepened and changed by it. Together they have walked through the shadow of death and emerged into the light on the other side. The ram takes Isaac's place on the rebuilt altar. Flames rise and consume the offering as father and son watch together in reverent and grateful silence. Smoke climbs straight upward in the still air, carrying their thanks and adoration toward heaven. The smell of the burning sacrifice mingles with the wild scent of desert thorns and dry herbs. Abraham names the place, "The Lord will provide." The Hebrew phrase, Yahweh Yireh, will carry itself through generation after generation. On the mountain of the Lord, provision appears at the very moment when hope seems to have run out entirely. Even in the deepest and darkest hour, God makes a way forward. The angel speaks again as the fire burns down to coals. The voice of God arrives, carrying renewed promise and blessing, expanded beyond what was given before. "Because you have done this, and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will certainly bless you, and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and as the sand along the seashore." The familiar promises now carry new and immeasurable depth. Abraham has proven his faith beyond the reach of any doubt. The covenant now rests on demonstrated obedience rather than on verbal agreement alone. The patriarch has shown that he will hold back nothing from God, not even the most precious thing he possesses. "Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies," the angel continues, "and through your offspring every nation on earth will be blessed, because you have obeyed me." Isaac takes in these words with a new and permanently altered understanding. He is no longer simply Abraham's beloved son. He is a vital link in God's eternal design. His life, drawn back from the brink of death by divine intervention, carries a destiny that reaches far beyond his own individual existence. He bears both the weight and the wonder of being chosen and preserved for a purpose. They descend the mountain together in thoughtful quiet. The two servants wait exactly where they were left, entirely unaware of the drama that unfolded above them. To those servants, Abraham and Isaac return, looking somewhat subdued but otherwise unchanged. They cannot see the invisible marks that testing leaves on the soul. The journey home passes in a contemplative silence that neither man feels any need to break. Isaac walks differently now, not with diminished trust, but with a far deeper awareness of what life and faith and God actually are. He has felt the edge of death press close and been pulled back by divine mercy. Life is sweeter now for having been so nearly surrendered. Abraham's relationship with his son shifts in ways that are quiet but permanent. The willingness to offer has been proved, and it will never need to be proved again. Love, deepened by the most extreme of testings, forms bonds stronger than anything ordinary experience can create. They understand each other now in ways that exist beyond the reach of words. Sarah waits with visible anxiety for their return. Something she sees in Abraham's expression tells her that things of great significance have taken place, even though he does not explain the details right away. Isaac embraces his mother with an intensity she feels, but does not yet understand. She senses that something profound has shifted, but she does not press for an explanation. The ram's horns are kept and hung in Abraham's tent as a constant reminder. Whenever doubts surface or faith wavers, he needs only to look at them to remember what God provided on that mountain. The Lord who provided a substitute in that critical moment will provide for every need that arises, in his own way and in his own timing. Isaac carries his own memories of the mountain, memories that will never leave him. The roughness of the stone against his back, the brightness of the sunlight flashing off the blade, his father's tears falling like rain onto his face, the angel's voice splitting open the silence at the last possible moment. These images will shape his understanding of God for the entire remainder of his life. The test has ended, but what it set in motion will move through generations. Abraham's willingness to give up Isaac becomes the standard by which faith is measured. The mountain where God provided will be remembered as the place where true worship was offered and received. In quiet and reflective moments, Abraham turns over the strange arithmetic of divine testing. He was required to give up everything in order to receive everything. He was commanded to appear to destroy the promise in order to secure it permanently. He was asked to act in ways that seemed to contradict faith itself in order to fully demonstrate it. The paradox no longer torments him the way it once did in the darkness before dawn. God's ways move at a level that transcends the logic available to human minds. Divine wisdom operates according to principles that finite understanding cannot fully map or follow. Faith means holding on when understanding collapses, obeying when every circumstance seems to argue for resistance. Isaac grows into manhood, bearing the invisible mark of one who has been offered and redeemed. His life carries a particular gravity because it was brought back from the edge of death. He will become the father of Jacob. The nation will be born from one whose life was preserved by a substitute sacrifice on a mountain in Moriah. The mountain stands in silence beneath the stars. Wind moves through the thorny shrubs where the ram was held fast. The altar stones settle deeper into the ancient earth. But the memory of what happened on that height will never grow dim. God provided. He always provides. On the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided. Sarah's death and burial. The tent that once rang freely with Sarah's laughter grows quiet as the weight of years settles over Abraham's camp. Sarah's hair has turned white as the salt flats of the desert. Her hands, once quick and generous in hospitality, move now with a slower and more deliberate care. Sanden Ushiifen. Yet her eyes still hold their sparkle whenever Isaac comes by with tales of his growing herds. 127 years Sarah has walked upon this earth. She has watched empires rise and crumble. She has witnessed great cities being built and wicked ones being swallowed by fire. She has lived through famine and plenty, through terror and joy, through barrenness and abundance. Now her time draws toward its close. The end comes softly, the way evening shadows stretch longer across familiar ground. One morning, Sarah feels the deep weariness in her bones and knows this day will be unlike any other. She draws Isaac close and whispers her final blessings over him. Her words carry the wisdom of a lifetime spent learning to trust in God's timing. Abraham sits at her side as her breathing grows shallow. Their fingers intertwine, aged hands quietly remembering the strength they once held. Together they journeyed from Ur to Canaan. Together they have doubted and believed, stumbled and triumphed, waited through long seasons, and then received beyond all expectation. Now one journey ends while another begins. When Sarah's spirit departs, Abraham's grief crashes over him like a flood. This woman who laughed at God's promise and then cradled that very promise in her arms, she is gone. The tent that sheltered their love for more than a century stands empty now. The voice that called him husband has fallen silent forever. Isaac weeps beside his father. Sarah was not merely his mother, but his dearest companion. She who had waited so long for his birth had treasured every single moment of his childhood. Her passing leaves a void no other person can ever fill. The camp feels smaller in her absence. Abraham's mourning follows ancient customs, yet carries a depth that is entirely his own. He tears his garments and covers his head with dust. He fasts and prays and remembers. Each tear carries a memory with it. Sarah's beauty in Ur, her fear in Egypt, her laughter at Isaac's birth, her joy when he returns safely from Moriah. When the first sharp shock of grief passes, practical matters press for attention. Sarah's body must be prepared for burial according to proper tradition. But where can she be laid to rest? Abraham holds no land of his own in Canaan, only the temporary grazing rights he has negotiated with local tribes. He needs a permanent resting place for his beloved wife. The Hittites hold authority over the region surrounding Hebron, where Abraham has often made his camp. Their city sits nestled in the valley, while their fields spread across the surrounding hills. Among them lives a man named Ephron, who owns a cave in the field of Machpelah. That burial site appeals to Abraham for its security and its dignity. Abraham approaches the Hittites with his request, "I am a foreigner and a stranger among you. Sell me some property for a burial site here, so I can bury my dead." His words openly acknowledge his outsider status while appealing to their sense of hospitality. The Hittites respond with elaborate courtesy. "You are a mighty prince among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our tombs. None of us will refuse you his tomb for burying your dead." Their offer seems generous on the surface, but Abraham recognizes the trap hidden beneath all that politeness. A gift can be reclaimed. Hospitality can be withdrawn. What is freely given can just as easily be taken back when circumstances shift. Abraham needs legal ownership, not a charitable gesture. He must purchase the cave outright if his family is to rest there permanently. "If you are willing to let me bury my dead," Abraham replies, "then listen to me and intercede with Ephron, son of Zohar, on my behalf, so that he will sell me the cave of Machpelah, which belongs to him and is at the end of his field. Ask him to sell it to me for the full price as a burial site among you." Ephron himself is seated among the elders gathered at the city gate. In this culture, business is conducted in public. Witnesses ensure that agreements are honored and remembered across the years. The cave's owner speaks directly to Abraham with flowery generosity. "No, my lord, listen to me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. I give it to you in the presence of my people. Bury your dead." Again, the offer of a gift wrapped in honor but carrying hidden dangers. Abraham bows respectfully but holds firm in his desire to make a proper purchase. "Listen to me, if you will. I will pay the price of the field. Accept it from me so I can bury my dead there." He will not be turned aside from legal ownership, no matter how generous the alternatives may appear. Ephron names his price with a casual air. "Land worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between you and me? Bury your dead." The sum represents enormous wealth, far more than the cave's actual value. But Abraham pays without haggling, weighing out the silver in full view of all the witnesses. The transaction is recorded with care. Abraham purchases not just the cave itself, but the entire surrounding field. Trees and boundary lines are specified. Rights and access are clearly defined. What belongs to Abraham and his descendants is established beyond all dispute. Sarah is laid to rest in the cave of Machpelah, with the dignity befitting the mother of promise. Abraham's tears water the ground that now belongs to his family. This first piece of Canaan, purchased with silver and sealed with sorrow, becomes the foundation of his descendants' inheritance. The cave holds far more than Sarah's body. It contains the dreams they shared, the promises they believed together, the love they nurtured through decades of wandering. Here lies the woman who left her homeland to follow her husband's God. Here rests the mother whose laughter welcomed an impossible joy. Abraham returns to his tent, changed by his loss. The familiar spaces echo with Sarah's absence. Her weaving sits half-finished. Her cooking vessels stand unused. The bed they shared stretches empty beside him. Grief becomes his constant companion, softening only with the slow passage of time. Yet, even in sorrow, purpose remains. Isaac needs a wife. The promise requires continuation. God's plan cannot be derailed by death, however painful. Abraham must arrange his son's future while honoring his wife's memory. Love must yield to responsibility, though the yielding brings its own kind of agony. The cave of Machpelah stands ready to receive other members of Abraham's family when their time comes. It will shelter Abraham himself in due season. Isaac and Rebekah will rest there. Jacob and Leah will join them in turn. That first real estate purchase in Canaan becomes the family tomb for generations yet to come. Sarah's legacy lives on in Isaac's laughter, in the promises yet to be fulfilled, in the faith that persisted through decade after decade of waiting. She who was beautiful enough to attract the attention of kings becomes mother to multitudes. She who once doubted God's word lived to see that word come true. Death cannot diminish such a heritage. Finding a wife for Isaac, Part 1. 3 years pass after Sarah's burial, and Abraham begins to notice a change in Isaac. His son moves through his daily routines with quiet efficiency, but lacks the joy that once marked his every step. Grief has aged him beyond his years. The tent where Sarah once bustled with activity stands largely empty now, visited only for sleeping. Abraham recognizes the signs because he carries them himself. Loneliness settles over their camp like dust after a sandstorm. Isaac needs more than flocks and servants to fill his days. He needs a companion, a helpmate, a woman who can restore laughter to their dwelling place. But finding a wife for Isaac presents unique challenges. The local Canaanite women worship foreign gods and follow customs that would put Isaac's faith at risk. Their fathers practice rituals honoring idols rather than the one true God. Marriage into such families would dilute the promise and bring confusion to future generations. Abraham's thoughts turn northward toward Nahor, his brother's city. There, among his own people, live women who share his heritage, even if not fully his faith. Family ties run deep in that place. Customs remain familiar. A wife chosen from among his relatives would understand Isaac's background and his calling. Yet Abraham himself cannot make the journey. His years weigh heavily upon him now, and travel to Nahor would require months. The dangers of the road seem greater than his aging body can endure. He needs a representative, someone trusted enough to choose wisely on Isaac's behalf. His chief servant has served the household faithfully for decades. This man oversees all of Abraham's possessions and makes important decisions in his master's absence. If anyone can be entrusted with such a delicate mission, it is this experienced and devoted man. Abraham calls his servant aside for a private conversation. "Put your hand under my thigh," he instructs, following the ancient custom reserved for the most solemn oaths. The gesture creates a sacred obligation between them. What is promised here cannot be broken without drawing divine judgment. "I want you to swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of the earth, that you will not get a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I am living." The prohibition is absolute. Isaac must not marry locally, regardless of beauty or convenience or political advantage. The servant understands the weight of this charge. He has watched Isaac grow from his miraculous birth into thoughtful manhood. He has seen the boy's faith tested on Moriah and strengthened by that trial. This young man's marriage will affect not only his personal happiness, but the continuation of God's promise to Abraham. But what if the woman is unwilling to come back with me to this land? The servant asks, thinking practically. "Shall I then take your son back to the country you came from?" The question reveals careful thought about the complications that might arise. Abraham's response comes swiftly and firmly. "Make sure that you do not take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who brought me out of my father's household and my native land, and who spoke to me and promised me on oath, saying to your offspring, I will give this land. He will send his angel before you, so that you can get a wife for my son from there. The patriarch's faith shines through his instructions. The God who once called him out of Ur will provide a wife for Isaac from Nahor. The divine providence that has guided their steps through decades of wandering will not fail them in this crucial matter. The angel of the Lord will prepare the way. If the woman is unwilling to come back with you, Abraham continues, then you will be released from this oath of mine. Only do not take my son back there. Isaac must remain in Canaan, the land of promise, regardless of whether a suitable wife can be found in that distant place. The servant swears the oath with full understanding. He will journey to Nahor, carrying Abraham's authority and God's guidance. He will seek a woman worthy of Isaac from among Abraham's relatives. He will not return empty-handed if divine providence provides success. Preparations for the journey begin at once. 10 camels are selected from Abraham's herds, enough to carry gifts and supplies while impressing Isaac's potential in-laws with the family's prosperity. The servant chooses valuable items that display Abraham's wealth: jewelry, fine fabrics, precious metals, aromatic spices. The gifts serve multiple purposes. They demonstrate Isaac's ability to provide well for a wife. They honor the bride's family with tokens of respect. They create obligations that encourage favorable consideration of the marriage proposal. In ancient culture, such gestures carry a weight that goes far beyond mere politeness. Abraham personally blesses the mission before departure. His prayers rise like incense, asking God to guide his servants every step. The success of this journey will determine Isaac's future and the continuation of the promise. Everything depends on finding the right woman in Nahor's city. The caravan departs at dawn, laden with hopes as much as with gifts. Abraham watches until the dust cloud disappears beyond the horizon. Isaac stands beside his father, both men united in silent prayer for success. Behind them, the empty tent waits for new laughter to fill its silence once more. Days stretch into weeks as the journey unfolds. The servant guides his camels northward through familiar territory, retracing in reverse the paths Abraham once walked. Each mile brings him closer to Nahor, closer to the encounter that will shape Isaac's destiny. The way is long and sometimes dangerous. Desert winds scour exposed skin. Water must be carefully rationed between known wells. Bandits haunt certain passages, waiting for unwary travelers. But the servant presses forward, sustained by his oath and his master's prayers. Finally, the walls of Nahor appear on the horizon. The city hums with activity as evening draws near. Women emerge from their homes to draw water from the communal well. Young and old, beautiful and plain, they gather for this daily ritual that sustains life in the ancient world. The servant stops his camels outside the city as the shadows lengthen across the ground. This is the moment of testing. Here at this well, God will reveal Isaac's bride. The faithful bondsman prepares himself to witness divine providence at work in the simple interactions of daily life. Finding a wife for Isaac. Part 2. The well outside Nahor buzzes with evening activity as women arrive one after another, carrying empty jars balanced on their shoulders. The servant watches from his position near the camels, studying each face for signs of character and kindness. His heart beats steadily as he prepares to witness God's guidance in this most crucial selection. Prayer rises silently from his lips as the women draw near. Lord, God of my master Abraham, make me successful today and show kindness to my master Abraham. See, I am standing beside this spring, and the daughters of the townspeople are coming out to draw water. The test he proposes to God reveals wisdom gained through years of observing human nature. Beauty fades, but character endures. A woman's response to a stranger's simple request will reveal more about her heart than any formal introduction could accomplish. May it be that when I say to a young woman, "Please let down your jar that I may have a drink," and she says, "Drink," and I will water your camels too. Let her be the one you have chosen for your servant Isaac. By this I will know that you have shown kindness to my master." The prayer shows remarkable faith. The servant asks for a specific sign that goes well beyond ordinary courtesy. Offering water to a thirsty traveler is expected hospitality, but volunteering to water 10 thirsty camels, that requires exceptional kindness and a genuinely generous spirit. Before his prayer even ends, a young woman approaches the well. Her bearing suggests nobility blended with humility. She moves with graceful confidence, neither proud nor timid. The water jar resting on her shoulder appears light in her capable hands. Her beauty strikes the servant at once, not the painted attractiveness of city women, but the natural radiance of health and joy. Her skin glows with outdoor vitality, her eyes sparkle with intelligence and warmth. This is a woman who finds delight in simple living. She fills her jar with efficiency and prepares to head back home. The servant hurries forward, his heart pounding with anticipation. "Please give me a little water from your jar," he requests, letting his voice sound deliberately weak and weary. "Drink, my lord." She responds at once, lowering her jar without a moment's hesitation. Her manner shows genuine concern for his comfort. She waits patiently while he drinks, showing no impatience to return to her own responsibilities. When the servant finishes drinking, the young woman speaks the very words that confirm divine guidance. "I will draw water for your camels too, until they have had enough to drink." She offers the service freely, without being asked, exactly as the servant had prayed. The full weight of her offer becomes clear as she begins the task. 10 camels can consume enormous quantities of water after a long journey. Each animal might drink 25 gallons or more. This woman has just volunteered for an hour of hard labor to serve a complete stranger. She works with efficiency, running between the well and the drinking trough. Her jar empties and refills repeatedly as she pours water for the thirsty animals. Sweat beads on her forehead, but she continues without complaint until every last camel has drunk its fill. The servant watches in amazement. God has answered his prayer before he even finished speaking it. This woman displays precisely the character Isaac needs: selfless service, a generous heart, willing hands. Her actions reveal a soul prepared for the responsibilities of marriage into Abraham's covenant family. When the camels finish drinking, the servant produces a gold nose ring weighing half a shekel and 2 gold bracelets weighing 10 shekels. The jewelry represents significant wealth, enough to support a family for many months. He offers these gifts as tokens of gratitude and as signs of his master's prosperity. "Whose daughter are you?" he asks, his voice trembling with excitement. "Please tell me, is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night?" The questions seem casual, but they carry the full weight of destiny. Everything depends on her family connections. "I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Nahor and Milcah," she replies. The words strike the servant like a bolt of lightning. Nahor is Abraham's own brother. This beautiful and generous young woman belongs to the very family he has journeyed so far to find. God's providence has exceeded his wildest hopes. "And yes," she continues, "we have plenty of straw and fodder, as well as room for you to spend the night." Her invitation demonstrates the same hospitality that marks Abraham's own relatives. This girl's household will welcome strangers with the same warmth she herself has shown. The servant bows his head in worship right there beside the well. "Praise be to the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not abandoned his kindness and faithfulness to my master. As for me, the Lord has led me on the journey to the house of my master's relatives." His prayer of thanksgiving echoes across the water. Other women drawing water pause to watch this stranger celebrate beside their well. They cannot understand his joy, but they recognize genuine gratitude when they see it. The young woman, whose name is Rebecca, runs home to share news of the encounter. Her family gathers quickly when she describes the wealthy stranger and his generous gifts. The gold jewelry speaks of possibilities beyond their usual experience. Laban, Rebekah's brother, examines the gifts with calculating eyes. The craftsmanship suggests Egyptian or Mesopotamian origin. The weight indicates substantial resources. This stranger represents an opportunity for advantageous connection with distant relatives. "Come, you who are blessed by the Lord," Laban calls out when he reaches the well. "Why are you standing out here? I have prepared the house and a place for the camels." His welcome overflows with enthusiasm born of recognizing profitable possibilities. The servant follows Laban into the city. His camels are loaded with gifts that will soon serve a far greater purpose. The house of Bethuel bustles with preparation for honored guests, water for washing, food for feasting, comfortable quarters for resting. Everything is provided with generous spirit. But the servant refuses to eat until he has stated his business. The mission that brought him all the way to Nahor cannot wait for social pleasantries. Isaac's future hangs in the balance of the next few hours. Success or failure will be determined by how Rebekah's family receives his proposal. "I am Abraham's servant," he begins, and proceeds to tell the entire story from the start. He describes his master's prosperity, God's blessings upon the household, Sarah's death, Isaac's loneliness, and the specific prayer that led him to their well. He holds nothing back, presenting the full context of his request. The family listens with growing amazement. Abraham's name carries weight, even in distant Nahor. Stories of his prosperity and divine favor have traveled the trade routes. The possibility of alliance with such a blessed household appeals strongly to their practical instincts. When the servant finishes his account, he presents his formal request. "Now, if you will show kindness and faithfulness to my master, tell me, and if not, tell me, so I may know which way to turn." The moment of decision has arrived. Laban and Bethuel exchange a meaningful glance before responding. "This is from the Lord. We can say nothing to you one way or the other. Here is Rebekah. Take her and go, and let her become the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has directed." Their consent comes readily, perhaps too readily. The servant's gifts and Abraham's reputation have made the decision easy. But the most important voice has not yet been heard. Rebekah herself must choose whether to leave her homeland for a marriage to a stranger in a distant country. The servant presents additional gifts when the betrothal is confirmed. Jewelry and clothing for Rebekah, precious items for her mother and brother. The generosity demonstrates Isaac's ability to provide well for his bride and to honor her family properly. Ancient customs are carefully observed throughout. Feasting follows the formal agreement. The household celebrates this unexpected alliance with Abraham's family. Wine flows freely as toasts are offered for the young couple's future happiness. The servant participates politely, but his thoughts remain fixed on the return journey ahead. Morning brings the moment of departure. The servant has accomplished his mission successfully, but one crucial element still remains uncertain. Will Rebekah willingly leave her family to marry Isaac? Her consent had been assumed during the negotiations, but now she must confirm her choice personally. "Will you go with this man?" her family asks her directly. The question hangs in the morning air like mist. Everything depends on her answer. A young woman's decision will determine whether God's promise continues through Isaac's lineage. Rebekah's response comes without hesitation. "I will go." Two simple words that change the entire course of history. She commits herself to an unknown future with a man she has never met, trusting in the same God who guides Abraham's family. Rebekah meets Isaac. The journey from Nahor to Canaan passes in a haze of anticipation and quiet anxiety. Rebekah rides one of the camels, swaying gently with the animal's rhythmic gait. The landscape shifts gradually as they travel south, but her thoughts remain fixed on the unknown man who awaits her arrival. Her servant girls chatter excitedly about the adventure ahead, but Rebekah often falls silent, lost in her own contemplation. What will Isaac look like? How will he receive her? Will they find true happiness together, or only the practical partnership that marks most arranged marriages? The questions multiply with each passing mile. Abraham's servant shares stories of Isaac during the long days of travel. He speaks of the young man's gentleness with animals, his deep devotion to his father, his quiet strength during times of trial. But words can never fully convey a person's true character. Rebekah must discover Isaac's nature through personal encounter. The caravan makes good time across familiar terrain. Wells provide adequate water. The weather remains favorable. No bandits trouble their passage. It seems God smooths their path homeward, just as he guided their journey northward to Nahor. Divine providence continues to bless this union. As they draw nearer to Abraham's territory, Rebekah's nervousness grows. Soon, she will meet not only her future husband, but also the legendary patriarch himself. Abraham's reputation spreads throughout the entire region. Kings respect him, merchants seek his favor. She will become part of a household marked by God's special calling. Evening approaches as they enter the Negev region, where Isaac often pastures his flocks. The servant's eyes scan the horizon, looking for familiar landmarks. They should reach Abraham's camp before nightfall if their timing holds. The homecoming draws near. Suddenly the servant points toward a solitary figure walking in a distant field. "There is my master Isaac," he announces with obvious relief. He has come out to meditate in the field. The young man's custom of evening reflection has brought him to this providential meeting. Rebekah follows the servant's gaze and sees her future husband for the very first time. Even at a distance, Isaac's bearing suggests strength tempered by gentleness. He moves with unhurried confidence across the familiar ground. This is the man chosen by God to carry Abraham's lineage forward. Her heart pounds as the distance between them closes. Isaac notices the approaching caravan and walks toward them, curiosity evident in his stride. He recognizes his father's servant, but wonders about the additional travelers and the loaded camels. When Rebekah realizes that the approaching figure is indeed Isaac, she quickly dismounts from her camel and covers herself with her veil according to custom. The gesture shows proper modesty while heightening the quiet drama of their first encounter. Ancient proprieties must be observed. Isaac reaches them as the sun touches the western horizon. Golden light bathes the scene, creating an almost otherworldly atmosphere for this crucial meeting. The servant quickly explains his successful mission, while Isaac's eyes remain fixed on the veiled woman standing quietly nearby. "This is Rebekah," the servant announces, "daughter of Bethuel, son of Nahor, whom God has chosen to be your wife." The formal introduction follows protocol, but everyone present senses the deeper significance of this moment. Destinies are converging in the gathering dusk. Isaac approaches Rebekah with respectful courtesy. When she lifts her veil, their eyes meet for the very first time. What passes between them in that initial gaze remains known only to their own hearts. But those who observe note the immediate softening in Isaac's expression and the quiet acceptance in Rebekah's stance. The servant recounts the entire story of his journey, the prayer at the well, Rebekah's generous response, the family's consent, the gifts exchanged. Isaac listens with growing wonder at God's provision. Every detail confirms divine guidance in this marriage arrangement. Isaac takes Rebekah by the hand, a gesture that seals their betrothal according to ancient custom. His touch is gentle but firm, conveying both protection and affection. She does not pull away, but allows herself to be led toward the camp that will become her new home. They walk together as the first stars appear overhead. Conversation flows easily between them, as if they have known each other for years rather than minutes. The servant follows at a respectful distance, marveling at how naturally they connect despite their very different backgrounds. Abraham waits at the camp with obvious anxiety. His weathered face brightens when he sees the returning party. The successful completion of his servant's mission brings a joy that mingles with deep relief. Isaac will not remain alone. The promise will continue through this union. Rebekah meets her future father-in-law with the same gracious spirit she showed at the well. Abraham receives her warmly, recognizing in her the qualities Sarah once possessed. This young woman brings life and laughter back to their household after years of mourning. The wedding celebration that follows honors ancient traditions, but carries special significance. This marriage represents more than the joining of two individuals. It marks the continuation of God's covenant with Abraham into the next generation. The promise finds renewed hope in this young couple's union. Isaac brings Rebekah into Sarah's tent, the dwelling place that has stood empty since his mother's death. The symbolism is profound, new life entering where death once reigned, hope replacing sorrow, laughter returning to where silence had fallen. Their wedding night marks the beginning of a love story that will span decades. Isaac finds comfort for his grief over Sarah's death in Rebekah's companionship. She discovers purpose and belonging in her new role as the covenant-bearer's wife. The tent that once sheltered Abraham and Sarah's love now witnesses the beginning of Isaac and Rebekah's journey together. The same God who blessed the first couple extends his favor to the second. Promises pass from generation to generation through the intimate bond of marriage. Abraham watches his son's happiness with deep satisfaction. The loneliness that had settled over Isaac like a shadow lifts completely with Rebekah's presence. Laughter returns to their dwelling. The future looks bright with possibility and with hope. The servant who faithfully accomplished his master's mission receives honor and reward for his success. His prayer at the well has been answered far beyond his wildest dreams. God's guidance proved faithful throughout every step of the journey, confirming once more that the Almighty watches over Abraham's household with special care. Under the star-filled desert sky, a new chapter begins in the story of God's chosen people. Isaac and Rebekah's marriage will produce the twin sons who become Israel and Edom. Through their union, the promise made to Abraham continues its march toward fulfillment across all the generations. Abraham's final years. Peace settles over Abraham's household like evening dew as the patriarch enters his final season of life. Isaac's marriage to Rebekah has brought renewed joy to the camp. Their love reminds him of his own early years with Sarah, when the future stretched ahead bright with possibility. The old man finds deep satisfaction in watching his son's happiness. Isaac moves with new purpose now, caring for his expanding flocks while building a life with his beloved wife. The loneliness that once clouded his features after Sarah's death has lifted completely. Love heals what time alone could never mend. Rebekah brings energy and laughter to the household that had grown far too quiet in recent years. Her presence fills the spaces that Sarah's passing had left empty. She honors the memory of Isaac's mother while creating her own traditions and establishing her own rhythms of daily life. Abraham takes a new wife himself, a woman named Keturah, who brings companionship to his declining years. She cannot replace Sarah. No one could. But she provides gentle care and quiet conversation that make the long days more bearable. Love takes different forms at different seasons of life. Children bless Abraham's union with Keturah. Zimran and Jokshan, Medan and Midian, Ishbak and Shua, 6 sons born to the aged patriarch. These boys will not inherit the covenant promise, which belongs to Isaac alone, but they receive their father's love and a portion of his wealth. The birth of these children amazes everyone who knows Abraham's advanced age. Sarah's laughter at the very idea of childbearing seems less extraordinary now that their father continues to produce offspring well past his 100th birthday. God's power to create life defies every human understanding of natural limits. Abraham divides his attention carefully among all his children. Isaac remains the heir of promise, the son through whom God's covenant will continue. But the others receive affection and provision appropriate to their station. A father's love expands to encompass all his offspring, Gifts flow generously from Abraham's wealth to Keturah's sons. Livestock and silver, servants and land rights. Each boy receives enough to establish his own household when the time comes. But the bulk of the patriarch's possessions remains designated for Isaac, the chosen heir. The sons of Keturah eventually migrate eastward, establishing themselves in distant lands away from Isaac's territory. This separation prevents future conflicts over inheritance, while allowing each family the room to prosper according to their own circumstances. Abraham's wisdom prevents division from taking root among his descendants. Ishmael occasionally visits his father's camp, bringing news of his own growing family. The relationship between the two half-brothers remains cordial but distant. Isaac and Ishmael respect each other without ever becoming close friends. Their mother's rivalry created a gulf that time cannot fully bridge. Abraham watches his various children with mixed emotions. Joy fills his heart when he sees their prosperity and happiness, but he also recognizes the potential for future conflict among their descendants. The peace of his own generation may not survive into the next. His body begins to show the full weight of nearly 2 centuries of living. Movements that once were quick and sure become slower and more deliberate. His eyesight dims, though his mind stays sharp. The tent that sheltered his vigorous manhood now accommodates his gradual decline. Yet Abraham's spirit remains strong, even as his flesh weakens. He continues to worship daily, offering prayers and sacrifices according to his long-established customs. His faith has deepened through decades of walking with God. Age brings wisdom rather than doubt. Visitors still seek his counsel on matters of law and justice. His reputation for fairness and divine favor draws people from distant regions. Kings and merchants, herdsmen and farmers, all recognize his authority in settling disputes and making peace between enemies. Abraham uses these opportunities to speak of the one true God. His testimony plants seeds of faith in hearts that have known only idol worship. Some visitors return to their homelands, carrying new understanding of divine truth. The blessing promised to all nations begins to flow outward through his witness. The old patriarch spends increasing time in reflection and prayer. Memories return like spring rains, his call from Ur, the long journey to Canaan, the birth of Isaac, the test on Mount Moriah. Each experience reveals new layers of meaning as he looks back with the perspective of years. He often speaks with Isaac about the promises God has given their family. The covenant must pass intact to the next generation. Isaac needs to understand not merely the blessings, but also the responsibilities that come with being chosen. Legacy requires both inheritance and faithful stewardship. Rebecca listens to these conversations with growing understanding of her own role in God's plan. She carries within her womb the next generation of promise-bearers, though she does not yet know it. The future rests in her capable hands as surely as in Isaac's. Abraham's prayers increasingly turn toward thanksgiving rather than petition. God has fulfilled his promises far beyond imagination. The wandering shepherd from Ur has become father to many nations. His descendants will indeed outnumber the stars and possess the land of Canaan. Divine faithfulness has exceeded even the reach of human faith. As his strength gradually fails, Abraham finds peace in the certainty of God's unchanging love. Death holds no terror for one who has walked so closely with the Almighty. The same God who called him out from his homeland will welcome him into eternal rest. His final months pass quietly in the embrace of family love. Isaac and Rebekah care for him tenderly. Keturah provides gentle nursing. His younger children gather around to receive final blessings. The tent fills with quiet conversations and shared memories. Abraham's legacy extends far beyond his immediate family. The wells he dug still provide water for travelers crossing the desert. The altars he built still mark places where heaven once touched earth. The treaties he negotiated still govern relationships between neighboring peoples. His influence will outlast his earthly presence. The aged patriarch looks toward the future with confidence, despite his inability to see it clearly. God's promises do not depend on human strength or human wisdom. The covenant will continue through Isaac and his descendants. The blessing will spread to all nations according to divine timing. Death and legacy of Abraham. The morning arrives with unusual stillness, as if all of creation holds its breath. Abraham wakes slowly in his tent, feeling the weight of 175 years pressing upon his aged frame. His breathing comes shallow and measured. Today carries the scent of endings, the quiet gravity of final moments. Isaac sits vigil beside his father's bed, holding the weathered hand that once built altars across Canaan. Rebekah moves softly nearby, preparing comfort for the dying patriarch. Their presence brings peace to Abraham's heart. The promise will continue through their love and faithfulness. Keturah tends to Abraham's needs with gentle devotion. Though she cannot replace Sarah in his heart, she has brought real companionship to his final years. Her quiet strength has been a gift from God, easing the loneliness that might otherwise have consumed his declining days. Abraham's other sons gather as word spreads of their father's condition. Zimran and Jokshan, Medan and Midian, Ishbak and Shua, all come to receive final blessings from the man whose seed they carry. Even Ishmael journeys from his distant territory to honor his aged father. The dying patriarch speaks with each child individually, offering words of wisdom and blessing according to their individual destinies. To Isaac goes the primary inheritance, the covenant promises, the bulk of his wealth, the responsibility of carrying God's plan forward. The others receive generous gifts and paternal love. Abraham's voice grows weak, but his words carry the authority of one who has walked with God for nearly a century. He speaks of divine faithfulness, of promises kept and blessings received. His testimony fills the tent like distant thunder, reverberating with a power that transcends his failing strength. "The Lord has blessed me in every way," he whispers to those gathered around his bed. His eyes, dim with age but bright with faith, look beyond the tent walls toward horizons only he can see. Death holds no fear for one who has learned to trust completely in God's goodness. As the sun reaches its peak, Abraham's breathing becomes more labored. His spirit seems to hover between earth and heaven, reluctant to leave, but ready to embrace whatever comes next. The tent fills with the presence of the divine, as if angels have arrived to escort him home. Isaac leans close to catch his father's final words. "Remember the covenant," Abraham breathes. "Trust in God's promises. He who called me from Ur will be faithful to you and your descendants. The land will be yours. The blessing will flow through you to all nations." With these words, Abraham's spirit departs peacefully, like evening shadows, settling over familiar ground. The great patriarch, who left everything to follow God's call, has reached his final destination. His journey from Ur to eternity spans nearly 2 centuries of faithful walking with the Almighty. Isaac and Ishmael set aside their differences to honor their father together. The two half-brothers who might have become enemies unite in grief and in respect. Abraham's death creates a moment of reconciliation between the two branches of his family, if only for a brief time. Preparations for burial begin immediately, according to ancient customs. Abraham's body is washed and wrapped in fine linen. Aromatic spices preserve his remains for the journey to his final resting place. The care taken reflects the deep honor owed to one of God's chosen servants. The funeral procession travels to Hebron, where the cave of Machpelah awaits. Isaac and Ishmael carry their father's body together, a fitting symbol of unity in their shared loss. Behind them walk Abraham's other children, along with servants and friends, a long line of mourners honoring the departed patriarch. The cave, where Sarah has rested for 38 years, opens to receive her husband. Abraham is laid beside his beloved wife in the burial place he purchased with silver from the Hittites. Together they await the resurrection, their earthly journey complete, but their legacy only just beginning. Isaac inherits not only his father's wealth, but also his spiritual responsibility. The covenant promises now rest upon his shoulders. He must be faithful to pass them on to the next generation. The weight of divine calling settles upon him like a mantle. Word of Abraham's death spreads throughout the region like ripples from a stone thrown into still water. Kings who made treaties with him send condolences. Merchants who traded with him share memories of his fairness. Neighbors who knew his hospitality mourn the loss of a genuinely good man. But Abraham's greatest legacy lives not in the memories of men, but in the promises of God. The covenant made with a childless wanderer from Ur will continue through Isaac and his descendants. From this one man's faithfulness will come a great nation and blessing for all peoples. The wells Abraham dug continue to provide water for travelers crossing the desert. The altars he built still mark places where heaven touched earth. The trees he planted offer shade to weary sojourners. His practical contributions to the land endure alongside his spiritual influence. Isaac and Rebekah establish their household in Beer Lahai Roi, the well where Hagar once encountered God. There they will raise the twin sons who will carry the promise forward, Jacob and Esau, through whom the covenant will continue its journey through history toward ultimate fulfillment. The stars that once promised countless descendants to a doubting Abraham now shine upon Isaac and his growing family. Each point of light represents potential heirs to the covenant. The impossible has become inevitable through God's faithfulness and human obedience. Abraham's story ends, but the larger narrative continues. The God who called one man out of pagan darkness will use his descendants to bring light to all nations. The promise made beside a smoking sacrifice will find full fulfillment in ways Abraham could never have imagined. Under the desert sky, where Abraham once counted stars and believed God's impossible promise, a new generation takes up the torch of faith. Isaac and Rebekah, blessed with the patriarch's legacy, move forward into an unknown future, guided by the same divine hand that led their father from Ur to eternity. The cave of Machpelah holds Abraham's bones, but his influence spreads far beyond that limestone tomb. Kings and shepherds, priests and prophets, believers and seekers, all will trace their spiritual lineage back to the man who dared to trust God's call and leave everything familiar for the sake of a divine promise. Abraham's laughter mingles with Sarah's. In the realm beyond death, where promises faithfully kept create eternal joy. Their earthly struggles have ended in heavenly rest, but on earth, their story continues through Isaac and through all the generations yet to come, until God's blessing reaches every corner of creation through their faithful seed.